Hello everybody and welcome to Petri's Get IT one-day virtual learning event. Today we are diving deep into PowerShell, the connective tissue that ties many of Microsoft's products together and the tool that can help you automate your day and make your productivity just a little bit better. And when you pair it with things like the Microsoft Graph API, it unlocks a ton of potential for automation and allowing you to just manage your environment in just a more effective and efficient way. To help you get up to speed, we've lined up a series of experts, including people like Todd Clint, Peter Rising, Jeff Hicks, and Russell Smith to help you tap into the potential of PowerShell, because there is so much to learn about everything from just tips and tricks, working with Teams, working with Microsoft 365, and automating Windows 10. There is a ton of knowledge that you can absorb today, so stick around and hang out. But most importantly, make sure you scroll down the page and download the handouts. These are takeaways that you can print out, you can scribble on, take your notes to help you retain the information you're going to learn about today, because these experts are top of the class. They know their stuff ins and outs, and that's why we keep having them back each month to help you learn more about the topic of the day. And in this instance, we are diving deep into PowerShell. And if PowerShell, you want to, after you get done with PowerShell, you want to learn more, we have tons on Teams and SharePoint and everything else down on the archive page. That being said, we are going to kick things off here with Todd Clint, and with that, I hand it over to him.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Brad. Folks, I don't know if you appreciate how emotionally, mentally painful it is for Brad to introduce me and say nice things about me. Just hurts him right to his very core. So I do appreciate him stepping up and taking that one for you all so that we can talk about PowerShell and Microsoft 365. Now, if I had to pick two of my favorite things to talk about, you know, besides me, and my kids and my family and my cars and all that. But if I had to pick like my two favorite tech things to talk about, it would be PowerShell and it would be Microsoft 365. So this is all of Todd's favorite things all rolled up in one. I'm super excited about all of this. So first, let's talk about, well, not talk about me, that sounds bad, but this is my bio slide. You all know me. I see a bunch of familiar faces in the chat room. I'm Todd Clint. I'm a SharePoint MVP for about 600 years. I do consulting. I have found that PowerShell has become just like the core of my consulting job. I do this all the time. So the things that I've learned here are things that I've learned on customers' dimes and all of that. I also podcast, I write, I blog, all of those things. I encourage you to reach out to me if you have questions, anything like that about PowerShell, whatever. You can reach out to me, todd.clint@simpraxisconsulting.com. On Twitter, I help out on Twitter all the time. Go to my blog, any of those things. I'm a real friendly guy. Ask anybody in the chat room. I love these kind of questions. I love figuring these things out. I will say I have one lament that this is only one day of PowerShell. I think we should have a whole week of celebrating how great PowerShell is. I really love it all. So what's the agenda for this session? So for this session, I'm going to start out talking about just loving on PowerShell a little bit, just trying to get you all excited about it. Then we're going to cover what modules Microsoft has provided for us and what their strengths are and what their shortcomings may or may not be. Then we're going to talk about the PNP PowerShell, some of my favorite software ever. And then we're just going to kind of go through some fun scripts and some examples of things. Because of time constraints, because we only get one day, and because there's all these other great speakers coming up, Jeff and Russell and all those folks, I don't get all the time that I want with you all, so I don't have demos for you, but I do have some scripts at the end that we can talk through, and I can show you all the brilliant things that I have been able to do with PowerShell, with Microsoft 365. So why should we care about PowerShell with Microsoft 365 anyway? The UIs are really good. You can get a lot done in the UIs, and they keep getting better. For better or for worse, they're always changing, and they seem to always be changing for the better. So why do we even care about PowerShell? Why should you be giving me the next 45 minutes of your time? Well, this is really all for you. I give this session to help you become a better you. The biggest benefit to PowerShell is the fact that you can script it and it's repeatable very easily. I recently talked to a customer and they're migrating into Microsoft 365 not from another Microsoft tenant or on-prem or anything, from an inferior platform. We won't name names. No need to embarrass anybody. But as they're looking through their migration plan, they need to create 3,000 sites to migrate their content into. Now, obviously, you can do that in the UI. You can go to the Sharepoint admin, new site, click, click, type. You can do that and create those sites. Once you start doing 3,000 of them, though, that gets a little rough on the old mouse and finger there. Now, unless you're in an industry that has unpaid interns or things like that, doing the same thing, no matter how easy it is, 3,000 times really gets tough. So one of the first things I'm going to do for them is we're going to just knock those sites out with PowerShell. And they've got a CSV file that's coming out of their other system. I'm going to write some PowerShell magic and take that CSV file, and they're just going to go walk away, get some coffee, play some solitaire, talk about how great the local sports team is doing, and when they come back, all of those sites will be created exactly the way they want them to be. So repeatability, scriptability. I don't know if you've noticed, but after you move into the cloud, just the objects become more numerous, more sites, more teams, more groups, whatever. And so doing things manually just really becomes a hassle. So being able to repeat things, doing them repeatedly is a real benefit, and PowerShell does that in spades. The next benefit of it is even if you're only doing it once in a while. So after this company gets on to Microsoft 365, they get those 3,000 sites created and migrated, they're going to be creating new sites periodically. And it's maybe only 1 or 2 a week, who knows. But if they have a PowerShell script that does it, then they don't have to worry about mistyping things or creating the wrong type of site. It gives them consistency. They have a run book that does these things for them. So another benefit of PowerShell, even if you're only doing things 1 or 2 at a time, is consistency, reliability, dependability, all those words that end in ability. It just makes your job a lot easier. And honestly, it's probably going to be quicker, and that gives you more time to do funner things. Another great benefit of PowerShell is its free documentation. Once you script a process like creating a new project site or whatever, you're halfway done with the documentation. And everybody agrees that we need documentation. I talk to everybody, every single person agrees we need documentation. We all agree that we need more documentation. Very few people actually enjoy doing the documentation. And so with PowerShell, once you write your steps out, define your process, you've got half of it done. And as long as you don't do bad things like use aliases and things like that, it's going to be very easy for the next person to write. And then, kind of take you over that limit or over the edge there, put lots of good comments in. That's one of the things that I do. I nearly have a comment for every line of PowerShell that I put, but for sure a comment for every chunk of functionality inside of there. And I heard some advice a while back that was something like, comment your code like the next person that's going to read it is a psychopathic killer who knows your home address. I kind of subscribe to that. I try to put really great code in. The other reason that I do that is because I think a lot of times my PowerShell code's not very good. And so somebody can look at my code and have no earthly idea what I'm trying to do, but that little description at the type, takes the widget and puts it in the nebula or whatever, and they're like, oh, this is what he meant. Oh my goodness. So you get free documentation for your processes when you do it. And kind of the next thing, and this is a lot of the things I'm going to talk about in this talk are using the maturity model idea, this idea that you crawl and then you walk and then you run. And part of your PowerShell journey in the PowerShell maturity model from a high level is very clear. The first thing you do is you run a command that does a thing, and then you run a command and chain it with another command to do a thing, and then maybe you find something on a blog somewhere and you paste that in and it does a thing. And at the far end of that maturity model is the last bit here, being the tool maker and not the tool. So we all know that Jeff Snover is the father or godfather, however, of PowerShell. He's the person at Microsoft who breathed life into this thing that we know and love is PowerShell. He is the father, but if there was like a crazy uncle of PowerShell, it would be Don Jones. And Don Jones was one of the original PowerShell MVPs. I spent many hours sitting at the feet of Don Jones, learning all about PowerShell and how to be a better technologist and all of that. And one of the things that he really preached that really spoke to me was to be the tool maker, not the tool, or not the tool user. And so I write all of my PowerShell for myself, for my customers, whatever, with the idea that I will run it once to show it to somebody else and they will run it after that. So why does that benefit you? Because that frees you up to do cooler things inside of the stack. Now, instead of being the person who creates sites. Now you're the person who wrote the script to create sites and somebody on the help desk or somebody else does it, and you can do cool things. You can learn about security or the new features or whatever. So automating things with PowerShell gives you the opportunity to free up some time and do funner things. Before we get into using PowerShell with Microsoft 365, I wanted to talk a little bit about some environmental things. First is you should be using Visual Studio Code to write all of your PowerShell. It's not just for developers, it's for all of us. It's a great environment. I use it exclusively. I do some testing on the command line. I'm going to talk about that in the next slide, but I write all of my stuff in Visual Studio. It's a free download. It's got a great PowerShell extension, so you can see we've got the highlighting and it does the error checking and all that. It's a great environment to use PowerShell with. One thing I don't have in this slide deck, because I just flat ran out of time, is this also makes it very easy to integrate source control. So you can bolt your Visual Studio Code installation up to a GitHub repository, write your PowerShell, sync it up to GitHub, have versions, have all that. It's super easy to do. Well, not super easy, but it's easy enough to do. And it just really makes your experience writing PowerShell that much better. And I've got a link down here. There is a site where you can even run it in the cloud. So somebody wrote a great site called GitHub 1S, I believe, that lets you open up code in Visual Studio on the web inside of GitHub. So you can go to a GitHub repository, see some PowerShell, click a button, and open it up in Visual Studio. Great stuff. Don't be afraid of it. It's not just for developers. For goodness sakes, do yourself a favor. Check this out. The other thing that I wanted to mention is check out the Windows Terminal. So this is an environment that hosts environments. So it hosts, you can see from the screenshot, a command prompt, Windows PowerShell, the PowerShell 5 stuff, PowerShell 7, Azure Cloud, whatever you can put in here. There's Linux shells, all that. This is the future of where the command prompt's going to go. I particularly like this because I can have tabs and you can do infinite customization, also free in the Windows Store. Grab that. It is my UI or my environment of choice when I'm running things from the command line. It's really, really great to use. The final environmental piece that I want to talk about is getting a dev tenant, a demo tenant, a tenant that is not production, that you can try these things in. They are free. Microsoft gives them away. So you can go to that blog post of mine down there, Get Dev Tenant, sign up and get one of these dev tenants. It's a great place to try all this new PowerShell out. For goodness sakes, don't do these things in production. Do it in one of those. I promise you, you will not get fired if you screw something up in one of your dev tenants. So get out there, and of course you can use this for PowerShell or whatever, but as you're learning these PowerShell commandlets and creating things and trying things, best to do that in a dev tenant where there's no chances of getting into trouble. All right, enough about the environments. Now I promise we're gonna get to some Microsoft 365 stuff. Just stay with me, I promise we will do it. But the first thing is we need to talk a little bit about PowerShell, about passwords in PowerShell. So those of you that have come from the on-prem world, you're used to running PowerShell, on SharePoint servers or whatever, and you don't need to authenticate because you're on the box, you're already logged in. PowerShell knows who you are, you're hitting the object model, so Windows knows who you are. All of that goes out the window when you start working on Microsoft 365. You're going to have to type your username and password a lot as you're doing these things. So one of the first things you need to do is find a way to do that stinks less. I hate typing my password in. I hate it because I always have big long passphrases that have letters and numbers and symbols and clicks and bangs and blood samples and all of that stuff. And so every time I have to type it, it's pretty horrible. So for this slide and the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about some good and bad options. Obviously, this has to do with security, and I always like to think of security, any type of security, as a continuum. And on one end of that, we have easy to use, and on the other end of that, we have really secure. And in any situation, locking your door, whatever, you have to figure out where on that continuum you want to be. And so that's kind of what I'm going to look at for these scenarios that I'm going to throw you and tell you where they're at, easy to use or really secure. So the easiest way for most of these commandlets is you can just not do anything with credentials, and then when you try to connect to SharePoint or Teams or Exchange or whatever, it's going to prompt you. Really secure, really secure, really tough to use, so way over here on the side. Pretty painful, especially if you have those good long passwords. A little less annoying is you can use the credentials equal get credentials, so as you're writing a script, you can do that, and then it will store your credentials in an object. That's really handy if you're going to be connecting with multiple things. If you're going to be connecting with PNP to a couple of sites or SharePoint or whatever, you don't want to get popped for authentication every single time you have to connect. So you store it in a variable, and then as your script runs and makes connections, you can reuse those credentials. So that's really secure, horrible to use. But the real downside to that is you can't automate anything, because every time your script runs, somebody's got to be there to type the username and password. So for automated things, it doesn't scale very well. So another way to do this is to hard code your passwords in your script. Horrible idea. Worst idea ever. Chris Rock has a bit where he talks about, just because you can teach a bear to dance doesn't mean it's a good idea. This is that. This is not a good idea. I only showed this to show you what a terrible idea this is, because I've seen people do it. But right there in your script, you can hard code your password. And your script runs like a breeze, super easy, as far away from secure as you can get. Obviously, anybody that gets a hold of your script, not only can they see what you've done, but they can log into your tenant. And since it's all in the cloud, they can log into your tenant wherever they're at. Horrible idea. Never do that. Don't be that person. I've said too much already. The next option that I used to use all the time was an encrypted file. So there's a way in PowerShell to take a file and encrypt it, and then pull the contents of that file into PowerShell, and it contains your username and your password, fully automatable, all that. That still works. It's pretty secure. No problems that I know of. It's kind of fiddly and all that, but totally works. If you're doing that now, don't feel bad. Certainly not like the people above you, but not a great thing moving forward. The thing that I like better is using the Windows Credential Manager. And don't have a lot of time to talk about that because of the 45 minutes, but you can, with a variety of ways, use the Windows Credential Manager that's built into Windows, and through modules like the Credential Manager, create or retrieve those credentials and then feed them to your PowerShell script. So you can see something like that. Right there, I've got this credential called 065, and I created it with the Commandlet. I can create it in Windows itself. I'll show you that in the next slide. But then when you go into PowerShell, you can do the get, credentials equal get stored credential, pull that out, and then connect SPO service credentials, use that, and you're in. Very secure. Windows takes care of all the security. This is the way that I do this now every single time. Anytime I connect to a new customer tenant or a new dev tenant or anything, I type my password exactly once or maybe twice because I create an entry in the Windows Credential Manager the first time I get that password, and then I pull it out like this every time. It's the only time I ever use it. Or use the PNP. This is what we, in the storytelling business, this is what we call foreshadowing, building anticipation. Use the PNP for passwords. So this is just a quick thing about the Credential Manager. I showed how you can use that Credential Manager module to create them. You can also just create them in Windows. So go into Control Panel, look for Credential Manager. You want the Windows credentials. You can add a generic one. You can name it whatever you want. And here I name it tenant admin because that's easy for me to remember. You can also put the URL of the site, the tenant that you're going to connect to. So it could be https://m365x92 blah 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 your mama, and that I'll show you in a couple slides why that's valuable. But you can do that right in there, and then it just shows up like that. Again, completely safe. And then this is how I would retrieve it, and I get connected, and it's all good. Okay, so whenever I do that, I get questions about MFA. That really depends on your MFA provider. If you're using Azure for MFA, you do have the opportunity to create an app password, because MFA is good, you want that. You can also do things like conditional access. You can say, I need MFA unless it's from this IP address and it is your workstation's address or whatever. So there are ways around it. It depends a lot on who your provider is. Okay, enough of all that. Let's jump in and let's look at the Microsoft modules. So before you connect, there's kind of some default options that you want to consider. If you're new to this or you're having problems, I'll come back to this slide and see if you're doing the things. Being able to run as a local administrator on your machine is important, especially if you haven't installed it. Just installed the module before, because you'll need to install it. Now, I know some of you in the back of the room raising your hand, but Todd, yes, there are some fancy things that you can do with scopes and all that to install it, even if you're not a local administrator. That does work. It has some issues with versions of PowerShell and all that. That's kind of an advanced move. I wouldn't recommend that. if your workstations are locked down or whatever, try to get the ability to run PowerShell as an administrator for these modules. Some have required it in the past. I've kind of lost track of that, but that will be your best environment. If a module is not working, see if it works as an administrator. The next kind of default thing is try to be a tenant admin. So it's not all commandlets require this, but if you're having problems with something, try to log in as a tenant admin. These days, all of the tentacles are connected. So I mentioned in here, you don't need that for Exchange. You can be an Exchange admin or a regular user. But once you start thinking about things like groups, where if you create an Exchange, it creates a thing over here and a thing over here, things really get interconnected. So if something's not working correctly, try running it as a tenant admin. The next thing is you have multiple versions of PowerShell on your box. Your machine comes with Windows PowerShell 5, 5.1 specifically. PowerShell 7 is the newest, coolest PowerShell. Most, not all, but most of the Microsoft modules as of today, June 10th, 2021, do not support PowerShell 7. So if you're having problems, try them in Windows PowerShell, and that's going to be the fun blue icon. Some do work in 7, some parts of some work in 7, but if you're having problems, try it in 5.1. Your execution policy has to allow you to download scripts. You've probably already done that before. If you're having problems getting connected, especially with the MSO, use the sign-on assistant. Okay, enough of that. So now what tenants do you use? Or what modules do you use? Most folks' migration to Office 365 follows a pretty specific pattern. First, they bring in their identities, usernames, passwords, groups, all that kind of stuff. Then they drop in with Exchange and get that all set up, and then they move on to the other fun things like SharePoint, Teams, and all that. That's kind of the path I'm following here. So the first thing you're probably going to need to do when you connect to your M365 tenant is something around identity, and those modules are the two on the screen. Now the MSO or the MS Online module still works. It was the first one, came out around the turn of the century, and it still works as of today, but it has been deprecated, so it could stop working at any moment. It could stop working this afternoon for all I know. If you have scripts that are using the MSOL module or commandlets, try moving them into the Azure AD ones. They mostly come across one for one, not exactly. There are a couple of really edge case scenarios that only work in MSO module, but for the most part, if you're writing new stuff, write it in Azure AD, and if you've got any mission critical ones that are using the MS Online, get those moved over. And I've through these tried to show how using those credentials, how you can get in, how you get connected, and then how you can see what commandlets you can use. So Azure AD is the newer one. There's also an Azure AD preview that they add new functionality, things like that too. That's how you get connected. Again, user things, passwords, groups, all that, all those kind of things. That is not deprecated yet, but I have a feeling Microsoft is looking towards the future. You're good there for now, but there's another module here in a couple of minutes I'm going to talk about that you're going to want to start taking a look at in case it replaces this Azure AD module. All right, so you're all connected. You've got your identities, you've got your users, you're all good to go. The next bit is Exchange. Now, Exchange was one of the first products to put themselves out in M365 and to make a PowerShell module. They used to have one that you didn't even really download, you just connected to remotely. It was kind of odd. They have since updated that. The EXO version 2 module is out. It's still a little bit different. You can install it. It does have a local footprint, but it's only enough to get connected, and then when you get connected, it downloads some other things. It does support PowerShell 7, and it does support modern authentication, so it understands when you try to connect. If you need MFA, it will do all the prompts. Again, makes that tough for automating things, but it is your friend. This is an important one because even if you are not an Exchange admin in your organization, or if Exchange is just working fine, there are a bunch of things in M365, a bunch of user settings and things like that, profile pictures and all that, that the module or the commandlets in Exchange work the best for that. So it's good to have this one installed. It's good to know how to connect with it and play around with it a little bit, because there's going to be other things inside of M365 that you're going to want to tweak that will tweak the best in this module. So don't think you can ignore this one just because you don't have to fight with Exchange often. The next module is the SharePoint Online module. This one isn't as disappointing as it used to be. I've been doing this talk for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And the first time I stood up in front of a crowd of people and talked about the SharePoint Online module, it had 30 commandlets, 32 commandlets. It was pretty sad. Plus, I really just like having the Princess Bride reference on the slide, so I leave that on there. It's gotten better, but it's not going to be one that you use a lot, and I'll talk about why that is later. This, the SPO module, manages things at the tenant level and really nothing smaller than that. So it's not going to do things like, you know, create subwebs or things like that. It's going to be tenant level administration. It absolutely, as of today, does not run in PowerShell 7, which is a source of much frustration for me, but it is out there. Another reason, and I didn't talk about it in the PowerShell, the love and non-PowerShell slide, but another reason to get excited about PowerShell is when new functionality comes to a product, SharePoint in specific here, the management for that functionality is going to be in PowerShell before it's in the UI. So in here I've got hub sites, multi-geo, all that. Those are great examples. When hub sites first came live to M365, they didn't exist anywhere in the UI. They didn't exist in SharePoint Admin, they didn't exist in the sites. The only way you could create a hub site, associate to a hub site, was with PowerShell. So even if you don't need to automate things a lot, if you want to try some of the new things out, you're going to need PowerShell to do it. So you can install that one from the PowerShell gallery, install module, there we go. And again, have that one, have it ready. There's a couple of things right now, as of today, the only way that you can rename a site collection, so re-URL a site collection, is with this module. And so you do need to have it around, keep it updated and all that, but you won't use it a whole lot. Here's what the connect looks like. You connect to the admin site of your tenant. You use those credentials however you get them, with get credentials, get stored credentials, whatever. I always do like a get user or a get SPO site or something to make sure that things are really connected, and then that's how you find out all of the commandlets in that module as of that moment. Next is Teams. So for the longest time, Teams did not have a module, so I was very excited when that came out, and it has gotten considerably better since it came out. This is obviously for your Teams management tasks, and there's a bunch of those out there. Teams is all over the groups idea. You know, when you create a team, it creates a group and all that. So its fingers are all over by, you know, just coming out of the chute. But this is where you want to do Teams management things, set team settings, some of those things. So you can install the module. When you connect like that, you connect to your credentials. You don't have to give it any sort of namespace. It sees who you are, knows who you are. And then you can see with the get command which commandlets come in there, what crazy fun things you can do with the Teams module. Now, this one, you'll have to forgive me for adding. I hate myself for adding it. It's a horrible thing. But as of today, there are a few communication settings that you can't change anywhere except in the Skype for Business module. They don't exist yet in the Teams module. They don't exist in the Exchange module. Crazy things around telephony, things like that. So you have to know this exists. Do not install this one. Install the Exchange one, whether you need it or not. Install the SharePoint one, whether you need it or not. Do not do this one. Legitimately, the last time I installed this module, which was about a year ago, it took about an hour to get done. And that's because you have to install it. You have to reboot after you install it, and it doesn't install from the gallery, so you have to go download it and install it and all that. You have to import the module normally or manually because it doesn't put it in the PS module path. And there's just, it's just horrible. It's just a terrible, terrible experience. But again, for some things you need to have it. Couple of the caveats with this. Over the years, Skype for Business has been called many things, LCS, OCS, Link, whatever, and the commandlets reflect that. So if you can't find the commandlet you're looking for, remember these are the product names. And the last time I checked, there were 50-some commandlets that had the word Teams in them, so there are even some Teams settings in there. This is a horrible thing. Everybody involved should be ashamed of this, but if it comes down and you find something and you need to get it, you know, change it with this module. This is how you get it. All right, the Power Platform also has PowerShell. How powerful. Flow and Power Apps, or I guess Power Automate, I should call it on that bullet. Both have PowerShell admin support, I don't know, it feels like a stretch to call it that. When Power Automate and Power Apps were designed, and as they've grown, it's always been about empowering the user. And things like administration and all that were kind of second thoughts, and the PowerShell sort of shows that. So the Power Automate and the Power Apps commandlets are all together in that one module. And there are two modules, one for users and one for administration. And they have the same commandlets, so when you install one, you have to install them both if you're an administrator, and you have to clobber with one, and I might have them mixed up on there. It's a pretty awful experience, especially if you're experienced with PowerShell and you have some expectation about how things should run. This ain't it. It gets pretty ugly. But if you do need to do things like get a list of all the flows in your environment, get a list of all the Power Apps in your environment, see who owns what, this is a very ugly way to do it. The other thing is it doesn't connect the way that the other ones do. So, you've got connect Exchange, connect Microsoft Teams, connect SPO service, no, you've got add Power Apps account, and then you give it a username and a password, not a credential object. It's pretty frustrating. If you think you're ever gonna need this, install it and play with it a little bit before you need to get something done with it, because it's going to take you a while. It just doesn't play by the rules we're used to. Earlier I mentioned that the MS Online module was deprecated and that the Azure AD module was not deprecated, but I get the feeling, I'm feeling where the wind's coming from, and I feel like it might go that way. If it does happen, if the Azure AD module does go away, it will be in favor of this, the Microsoft Graph SDK. The fact that they call it an SDK instead of a PowerShell module is sort of a harbinger of how tough it's going to be. It's really difficult to use as of right now. They've made it better over the last couple of years, but it is tough. You can install it from the gallery now. I've got the link here to the GitHub project, but it is in the gallery. The thing about this module is, at least the problem that I have with it, is it's not created by humans. So it's not, programmers or whatever. It's created by something called auto-rest. And auto-rest, so obviously the graph is everywhere. Everything inside of Microsoft 365 has graph endpoints, and it's a tremendous thing for developers, and honestly a tremendous thing for PowerShell also. But the way the commandlets in this graph SDK are created is auto-rest is a program that goes out and hits REST endpoints and then generates commandlets for it. Now there's some guidance that the people who run this make. They have instructions. But what ends up happening is two somewhat bad things. Number one, it hits every endpoint and creates a commandlet for everyone. The last time I looked, this thing had over 800 commandlets, and it's just every little corner of every REST endpoint. So normally if I want to do something with the site, I'll say, get command module, SharePoint Online, and then name site, and I'll get 8 to 10, and I'll like, get, set, whatever. When you do that with this thing, no matter what object or whatever you do it on, you get dozens or hundreds. It's really frustrating because it is just so all-encompassing, and because it is automated, it just pulls all the things in. That's problem number one. Problem number two is every one of those commandlets, all 800 of them, are generated by this auto-rest, and they're not, they don't have good examples, if they have any examples at all. The parameter names don't always line up. They're not what we're used to when we use PowerShell. They don't follow all the conventions we're used to with PowerShell. So this is a really difficult one to use, and but it does all the things, and it does delegation and all that. It's really great once you can wrangle it, but boy is it tough. So know that it's there. Know that the Graph SDK really means PowerShell module, but that's one to know about. One thing that I would be remiss if I didn't mention was groups, and just that there is no groups module, because groups aren't a project, they are a product. So depending on what you want to do with a group, you can do it from other modules. So for this one, I normally start with whatever product I'm trying to impact the most. So if it's PowerShell, I use PNP. If it's Exchange, I use the Exchange module. But they all manipulate groups in different ways. So this is kind of tough. I mentioned in the last slide the Graph SDK does everything. So if you can get that figured out, you can probably do anything you need to with groups in there. But just know that there are multiple ways to get in, and you can only do some things from some ways and all of that. All right, so you're whipped into a lather, you want to do all this. I mentioned a little earlier how to install some of these things, the sign-up assistant, all of that. If you want to do it from PowerShell itself, you can use the PowerShell get Commandlet's install module. Again, you're going to want to run these in Administrator. The other piece of advice I would give you is run them as an admin, run them in Windows PowerShell 5 when you install them. Not PowerShell 7. I'm a big fan of PowerShell 7. I use it every place I can, but when I install modules, whether it's M365 or not, I do it in Windows PowerShell, because if you install it as an admin and you do it in Windows PowerShell 5, the modules files are put in the PS module path if you do it as administrator, and that path for Windows PowerShell 5, Windows PowerShell 7 can look in. So if you install a module, PNP or whatever, in Windows PowerShell 5 as admin, any person who logs onto that machine will be able to see it, and any PowerShell host that you open will be able to see it. It gets confusing if that's not the case. So I've got this blog post, Posh Office 365 modules, where I list all the modules that I use and how to install them and all that kind of stuff. These are all listed there. So then the next thing, there's that, there we go, there, that looks good. They all get updated. So here's a slide on how to do some of that. You can use get installed module or get module list available. There's some little differences on that that I don't have time to get into. But if you installed it with the install module with the PowerShell get commandlet, you can update it with one of these. I usually throw a force at the end just to make sure. And again, do this from an admin PowerShell prompt in Windows PowerShell 5, and it'll all get updated in all the right spots. It won't get saved in your OneDrive or anything goofy like that. And on that blog post there, I've got a little snippet you can run to see which commandlets are out there and if there's updates and all that. And honestly, I run that like once a week probably. Okay, so this is the exciting part. The last 10 minutes we're going to spend talking about the PNP PowerShell. I could spend I have spent 45 minutes or 60 minutes talking about just this topic alone. So I'm going to go fast. You can download these slides from Brad. He's got them out on his site. And of course, again, at Todd Klin on Twitter, todd.klin at Simpraxis Consulting. I'm going to go through this kind of fast. I apologize, but come back to me with questions. All right, so we all know what the PNP is, the patterns and practices. Those folks wrote a few PowerShell commandlets a while back. They were met with huge love, so now this is kind of the go-to. This is my go-to module. When I'm crafting a new solution to any PowerShell problem, I start here and then go to other modules if I need help. But, so install module pnp.powershell. That is only for M365 out in the cloud. There is an on-prem version, the Sharepoint PNP PowerShell Online for Sharepoint 2013, 2016, all that. But for M365, you need the pnp.powershell. There used to be a PNP PowerShell Online for Office 365. That one's deprecated. They haven't touched it in like 6 months. Don't use that one if you can't avoid it. This one also fully supports all the authentication, fully supports Azure or Windows PowerShell, fully supports PowerShell 7, which means you can use it for Azure functions. And I have done that and it works great, and I wish I could talk more about that. If you think that's a great session idea or blog post, running Azure functions with PowerShell, let me know, because I would love to write that up if that's something that's interesting. But you can do that with the PNP, works like a champ. All right, this slide, again, just have a couple of minutes, so I don't want to spend a bunch of time here, but this is just to give you some ideas on what you can do. Files and lists and recycle bins and groups, oh my. Just a few of my favorite things with the PNP PowerShell on this slide. Can't get enough of this. So I talked earlier about how authentication and username and passwords are going to be a real pain, and that the PNP had a better solution. This is that slide. If you walk away from this session with nothing else, let it be how great this slide is. So I mentioned there was a manual way with the clicking of the mouse to create credentials. I mentioned there was a PowerShell module that you could download that would do all that. Forget all of those things, because you can do it with the PNP module that you're already going to have installed, and here is how. So from the top, add PNP stored credential. I give it the name. So earlier in those slides, I gave it the name tenant admin. If you give it the name of your tenant's URL, so tenant.sharepoint.com, it is smart enough when you do a connect with no credentials. So you can see my connect line there, connect URL, blah, blah, blah. I give no credential stuff at the end. Connect-PNP online is smart enough, if it doesn't see a credential solution, to look in the Windows Credential Store for that URL. And if it finds it, just use that. I use this all the time. I mentioned that I type my password once for a new user in the cloud. This is why, because I can just do connect after that. To make it even better, it not only does it for the root, but it does it for any sub-site. So if I try to connect to /site/HR with no credentials, it will look for /site/HR. If it doesn't find it, it will look for the tenant, and then it will use that. Brilliant. The only thing that it doesn't do, and why I sometimes have to type my password 2 times, is because tenant-admin doesn't match that. So I normally create one stored credential for the tenant and a second one for tenant-admin. And then I can connect to the admin site and do admin-y things without typing my password as well. As if that weren't enough, as if we didn't owe Erwin and the rest of the PNP team enough of a thanks for that. They also threw in a get PNP stored credential commandlet so we can use it with everything else. So the bottom part is if I need to connect to some other module. So I do credentials equal get PNP stored credentials, the name, my URL, that saves that credential object in there, and then I can use it to connect to Azure AD or SPO or whatever, and I never have to type the password, and it's secure. So on that whole easy to use and secure, it is all the way easy to use, and it is also all the way easy to secure. It is just the best thing ever. So again, if you got nothing out of this 45 minutes, this is the piece right here that will really make things easy. And this works for automation, this works for interactive. It works great. I threw this slide in. I don't get this much anymore. The PNP's gotten a lot of respect in the last few years, but I did have some problems early on with customers and telling them about the PNP, and their boss or security teams push back. So again, this is mostly just for reference when you download the slide deck, but it's absolutely legit. Microsoft signs this module with their own signing key and has for many, many years. It's super safe, it's open source. Don't worry about it, it's all good. One question I get is why you would use the different modules. Again, anytime I'm doing anything, I always start with the PNP, and then if I have to use something else, Azure AD, SPO, I do that. One thing I didn't mention is to connect with SPO, you have to be a Sharepoint admin or a tenant admin or whatever. With PNP, you can just be a site admin. So that opens up things. You can write scripts that power users can run. As long as you can log into the site, you can use PNP PowerShell with it. So it does most of the things that the SPO module does and site-specific things. And not to be ignored, it just makes you cooler. Like there's just no way around it. Makes you a cooler person. All right, for the last 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about some examples. Again, I don't have time to do demos, but I wanted to just give you some ideas on ways you can use the PNP PowerShell. So this is a pretty common one I get, is wanting to upload a file. Honestly, uploading a file is not that helpful, but uploading a bunch of files is super helpful. So you can take this and run with it. So you can connect, I mentioned, to deeper, webs and subwebs and all that with PNP Online. So I'm doing that. I'm creating a variable called folder that is really the document library name. That gets confusing. So when add PNP file says folder, it really means document library and folder. After you do it a few times, you'll figure it out. But right here, add PNP file, boom, you just uploaded a file to SharePoint. Now you can script reports, logs, whatever, boom, just goes up to SharePoint. What if you want to actually put it in a folder in that document library? Well, you use add PNP folder because only dummies do it in the UI. You create that folder with PowerShell, and then on your folder parameter there for add PNP file, you just put the folder name there. Super easy stuff. Okay, this PowerShell doesn't work as it is in here. They've changed some of these things, but the thing that I wanted to mention about this was the connecting to the document libraries to do a thing. So in this case, I was looking for some sharing settings that they've changed. But a couple of great nuggets in here. That get PNP list gets your lists. The includes says bring down specific details, because when you do a get list, it doesn't bring all of the details. And then only getting me the things that are the system list. So, or not system list, excuse me. So I don't want site assets, all those kind of things. I don't want to touch any of those. And where the property type is document library. So if I get list, it gets me the lists and libraries. So that little nugget there gets you all of the document libraries that are not system and are not lists. And then you can see I did some stuff in there to get users and all that. But really the big thing there is get list, and then you can see the get list item. This one takes that a bit farther, does the same thing, brings the document libraries down. The thing that I wanted to mention with this one is, again, when you do a get anything, get PNP site, list item, whatever, because CSOM doesn't give back everything, you have to tell it, you want specific property. So in the get, I do a default view is system list. And then once I get as I'm walking through that for each, I'm using the get PNP property commandlet. And that gets you properties for an object you've already downloaded or already gotten, but don't have, the thing, whatever the extra property is, because it wasn't part of the defaults. So if the get allows you to do an includes, you can get that property there. If it doesn't, you can use get PNP property to get that property. And you will know that you need that when you try to get that property and PowerShell tells you that property's not here. It's clumsy. It's one of the tougher parts of PNP, but that's you'll get the hang of it. The other thing in here is I spit out some output and I used a custom object instead of just write host or whatever. And that means that I can now take that and I've got an object that comes out that's got properties and I can put it down the pipeline. I threw this one in. It's a great story at Posh Restore Files about restoring files from recycle bin. The big takeaway here is that bottom line bin 20,000 to 30,000. I batched this up and did 10,000 on different machines. The bottleneck was my machine, not Office 365. So if you're doing something and you're doing tens of thousands of them, try breaking it up like that. Great story on that blog post. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was creating sites and Office 365 groups and all of that. Because of how groups are built, you can create a group without, you can create a SharePoint site without a group and a group without a team and all that. These are examples of those. Really the best way to do it is if you have the Teams module installed, you can do it with the new team. The team has to create a group, which has to create a SharePoint site. Otherwise, the new PNP site works pretty well too, but then you have to teamify it later, but again, you can do that with PowerShell also. Wanted to let you know that you can do some site templates inside of SharePoint. And so, saving them, adding files to them, that kind of thing. The big takeaway from this slide is that thing at the bottom, get command, PNP template, that'll show you how to get them, save them, import them, execute them, all that. I threw this in here to kind of show you how to get Microsoft 365 group permissions, because that's a little tricky. I don't have time to go through it right now, but that's something to read through. An example of getting flows and adding that Power Apps account and getting admin flows and getting all of your flows. It's clumsy. This one requires, I wrote this one a while back, it requires the MSOL module because the owner's names come back as object IDs on that name, so I had to resolve those. It's kind of clumsy. And this is what it looks like, so you can see it gives you the object name instead of bad news. Power Apps, same story, but it is there. If you want to disable the flow button inside of a document library, it's a really bad idea, but you can do that with SPO or the PNP module. Again, download the slides. All these examples are in there. I went a minute or two over. Sorry, Brad, I apologize for that. So much great PowerShell to talk about. Ugh. Anyway, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Reach out to me. I love answering questions about this kind of stuff. todd.clint@somepraxis.com. somepraxisconsulting.com, at Todd Clint. I don't know about the rest of you, but I can't wait to sit back and watch the rest of these sessions today. Specifically, I think the last one is my buddy Jeff Hicks. He has been great for me. He's answered 1,000 of my annoying PowerShell questions, so stick it out for the rest of the day. I promise you will learn great things from Jeff. He is very helpful, knows his stuff. I can't wait to see what he's got to show us. So anyway, take it away, and it's been great, folks, and be in touch. Let me know if you have any questions.
The session has now concluded. There are many more sessions ahead. Stay tuned and don't forget to download the handouts.
Hello and welcome to the Petri PowerShell one-day virtual conference. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let me introduce myself to you very quickly. My name is Peter Rising, and today I'm going to be talking to you about what's new with PowerShell and Teams integration. Before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. So as I said, my name is Peter Rising, or Pete, some people call me Pete, and I am a lead architect in Modern Workplace for a UK Microsoft partner. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in Office Apps and Services. I'm the author of 2 books, MS 500 and MS 700 exam guides. I'm also the co-founder of the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance User Group. I'm the co-host of a podcast called Cloud Conversations with my good friend Rue Campbell, who is also a fellow Petri contributor. And mentioned there that I am a contributor to Petri.com, which leads nicely into that. And I also contribute quite heavily to the Microsoft tech community, and I blog at peterrising.co.uk. I realise that's a lot of information, a lot of bullet points there, so if you want to find out anything more about all of those things that I do, feel free to contact me at my Twitter, which is at M365Rising, or you can email me directly at peter.rising@outlook.com. So, without any further ado, let's get started on the session. And we're going to break the session down into 2 parts for you today. First, we're going to go through some slides just to get up to speed with a few housekeeping bits and pieces about Microsoft Teams and how it relates to PowerShell. So we'll go through that. Hopefully it'll not be too much of a death by PowerPoint for you, but it's important to have an understanding of some of these principles before we get into demo world. So second part, I've given it away. It's going to be a demo. We're going to get into a Microsoft demo environment, and I'm going to show you how PowerShell can be used to do some basic administration tasks, some of the common commandlets and tasks that Teams administrators will regularly be doing on a day-to-day basis, so you can get a feel and an understanding for what sort of things that are necessary for those Teams administrators. We'll also, at the end of this presentation, just give you a bit of an awareness of what has changed recently in PowerShell for Teams. There have been a lot of changes in recent times, especially in relation to the impending retirement of Skype for Business in the summer of 2021 this year. There have been some changes in the Teams PowerShell to get ready for that. So we'll talk about that as well. But without further ado, let's start going through our slides and get you an introduction to managing Microsoft Teams with PowerShell. So the first thing we're going to look at is how can you manage Microsoft Teams as an administrator? And there are basically 3 ways of doing this. You can most commonly go through the Teams Admin Center. A lot of people are quite command line and code averse, so they'll want that nice GUI and familiar feel of an admin center. So that is option number 1 and the go-to for many people. Then there's PowerShell. PowerShell's a bit Marmite. A lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it. Some people are indifferent to it. I happen to love it myself, and hopefully through this I'll be able to impart some of that passion to you as well, and get you thinking a bit more about, well, actually PowerShell is really good for this, and think of it in a new way. And then finally, something that I can't speak to too much, but and we'll not cover today, but you can access and manage Microsoft Teams by using the Graph API as well, which it gives you a more developer type experience. I don't know an awful lot about the Graph API. It's something that's on my list to learn, and I may very well come back and do another talk on that at some point when I've had the time to get my head into that one and figure it all out. So, in all of these ways of managing Microsoft Teams, there are several settings and policies within Teams that may be configured, and these can be configured at either an organization-wide or a per-user level, and we'll get a feel for this as we go through the slides and into the demo as well. So, next, who can administer Teams settings and policies? Well, if you're familiar with Microsoft 365 as a whole, you'll probably be familiar with some of the privileged administrator roles that are present within Microsoft 365. And Teams is no different. Teams has a number of administrative privilege roles which can do different things within Microsoft Teams for administering settings and policies. Global administrators, we'll go through all of these and how they relate to teams, but global admins is a tenant-wide administrator object, and as you can imagine, with this being the most privileged account within Microsoft 365, this is able to manage everything in the Teams admin center and associated PowerShell controls. So nothing it can't do. The same applies to Teams service administrators. That is a Teams specific role and can do everything in Teams admin center and execute those associated PowerShell controls as well. It's obviously not as powerful as a global admin, because global admin has a much wider scope than just Teams, but those two administrators have the same amount of power when it comes to Teams. And then we get into some of the less powerful roles, shall we say. The first of which is the Teams Communications Administrators. If you're a Teams Communications admin, then you will be able to manage calling and meeting features within the Teams service. Then we've also got Teams Communications Support Engineers, who can troubleshoot communications issues in Teams by using some advanced tools. Going down a little bit more, Teams Communications Support Specialists. Now they can troubleshoot communications issues in Teams by using some basic tools, so they have a bit less capability and access rights than the support engineers do, shall we say. And finally, we have the Teams Device Administrators role. Now these are people who are going to be able to manage devices which are configured for use with the Teams service. So that's just a quick bullet point introduction to the relevant admin roles for Microsoft Teams. If you want to have a deeper dive into those roles and understand them in a more granular fashion, then check out this link at the bottom of the slide here for information on that on docs.microsoft.com using -admin -roles. Well worth a look. So the big question that I get asked a fair bit is, why PowerShell for Teams? And as I said, there are some administrators. I was one of these myself way back when. Somebody who was, I don't want to know about code, give me a nice GUI any day of the week. But there are reasons for using PowerShell as opposed to the Teams Admin Center. So what would they be? Well, three that I think are particularly relevant reasons would be, firstly, bulk administration tasks are far simplified by using the PowerShell, such as the ability to assign custom policies to multiple users quickly. If you've got common tasks and onboarding users, setting up teams, setting up users, things that you're having to do on a regular basis, then you can get CSV files and scripts and run these far easier than going into the GUI and messing around in there. So it's going to take some of the heavy lifting away for you. Once you've got those scripts on those processes sorted, they're just going to take care of themselves and need very, very little change or tweaking day to day. Then reason number two, some features and settings are only available in the PowerShell at the moment and not present within the Teams Admin Center. Now, I expect that over time, and we will see an example of this when we get into the demo, I expect over time that more and more features will start appearing in the GUI. This has always been the case with Microsoft Admin Centers. Teams is no different. We're seeing things getting added in the Admin Center all the time. But at the minute, there are some things that are not there and you have to drop into the PowerShell for. So that is a very, very good reason. And finally, many admins are simply more comfortable using PowerShell. It's horses for courses at the end of the day. Different strokes for different folks. What you're comfortable with. Some people like that GUI experience. Some people are far more happy in the command line and love their PowerShell. So there's no right or wrong really. There's whatever works best for you. So, where will PowerShell for Teams actually work? Well, the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module may be installed by using PowerShell get commandlets. To install the module for all users in the system requires elevated privileges. So you do need to start your PowerShell session with the Run as Administrator option checked. PowerShell for Teams will work with, not surprisingly, regular PowerShell for Windows. Why wouldn't it? That's where you'd expect it to work from first and foremost, obviously. Now, version 5.1 is the current recommended version of PowerShell to use with Microsoft Teams. That's not the most recent version of PowerShell, I'm sure you'll all be aware, but on the link that I provide here in this bullet point, again, a nice little docs.microsoft.com link for the Teams-PowerShell-overview %20. That's going to tell you, if you click on that and get more information, that version 7 has some known issues which are documented in that docs.com article. Now, this is a good link to take a note of and keep checking on a regular basis. If you're using PowerShell a lot, if you're using Teams for PowerShell, check this out and see updates on this, and you'll be in good hands by doing so. There are 3 other areas where you can get Teams to work with PowerShell. One is the Azure Cloud Shell, which, if you're not familiar with it, is something that you can get access to from the Azure portal at portal.azure.com, and in there there's an icon at the top. We'll try and remember to take a quick look at that in demo mode. You click on an icon and it will launch the familiar sort of blue PowerShell experience right within your Azure portal without needing to run the full version of PowerShell on your device. So that's another way of doing it. You do need a valid subscription for Azure to be able to utilize that service, but that's another means of doing so. You can also run it on Mac OS. Now, I'm a Mac user myself. I'm currently demoing from my MacBook as we speak. I must admit, I have tried PowerShell on the terminal experience on my Mac a few times, and I've found it a bit wanting. I've found that I can get it to work so far, but not necessarily go as far as I would like it to. I've had some problems with it and some bugs, shall we say. It's been a while since I tried it, admittedly. I probably need to go back to it and give it another go, but just be mindful that it's possibly not as good as you would expect the regular PowerShell for Windows experience to be. And you can also get it on Linux as well. I can't speak to Linux. I'm not a Linux user, so I don't know much about it or how it works in that environment, but Microsoft do tell us that Linux is something that you can run PowerShell for Teams. Okay, so as you would imagine, with PowerShell, there's always going to be lots of different commands that you can apply for, in this case, managing teams. And we can see on this slide a few examples, and there are many of these which you can find in the Microsoft Docs.com documentation on the good old internet. So some examples here. There's lots of add commands, so we can do things like add a team channel user. So that's going to add an owner or member to a private channel. Then we've got add Teams app installation as an example, which will allow you to add a Teams app to Microsoft Teams. Add a Teams user, so the add-Teams user adds an owner or member to the team and to the unified group which backs the team. And that's an important consideration to know about Teams, of course, if you're not aware of, that if you have a team in Microsoft Teams, then by default, by definition, you're going to get a Microsoft 365 or Azure AD unified group as well, which is the backbone for that team. So something to be aware of. Some other examples here on this slide: connect-Microsoft Teams. This is the commandlet which will actually get you to authenticate to the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module with a permissioned account with the appropriate admin roles, shall we say. And then, by the same token, something that I need to get better at doing, because I'm guilty of this, disconnect your team session as well. And then there's a few other examples there, like there's some get commands, get CS batch policy assignment operation, group policy assignments, and so on and so forth. So these are Teams-specific PowerShell commands, and I encourage you to go and look at the documentation on docs.microsoft.com for Teams PowerShell commands, because there are many that you can get to know and get to use as you need. Now, in terms of managing Teams policies, things are a little bit different because they currently use the commands that are more typically associated with the old Skype for Business Online connector for Teams, which is now retired. But the commands for these are now included as part of the Teams PowerShell module, and they've been introduced into that Teams PowerShell module since version 2.0.0, which was released earlier in 2021. Now, prior to that, you would have to have the Skype for Business Online connector module installed, as well as your Teams PowerShell. But now, since version 2.0.0, you can do it all from the Teams PowerShell. The commands are all available to you in there. And from here to manage policies for Microsoft Teams, and when we talk about policies, we're talking about meeting policies, messaging policies, that sort of thing. The examples in this slide focus on meeting policies, what settings are going to be applied to the users who have these meeting policies within Microsoft Teams. This will control the things that they can and cannot do, and we'll have a little bit more of a deeper look into some of the settings that come in these policies, setting up some new ones and all that when we get to the demo. But all very straightforward and logical, as you would imagine, as PowerShell always is. There are some get commands. These show the available Teams policies. For example, get -cs Teams meeting policy. That will show you the Teams meeting policies that you have in your tenant, in your Teams environment. Then the set command. Now, the set command will allow you to set the values on a policy to make some changes to those policies. Now, it's worth noting that some parameters in Teams policies may not be customized, and the set command will not work in this instance, so something to be aware of. Example of applying that is obviously set -Teams meeting policy. And then you would go into the particular setting within the policy that you wanted to enable, disable, change, whatever. New commands, now these allow the creation of new policies to be assigned to users in your organization. So if you wanted to set up a brand new custom Teams meeting policy and apply that with its settings to a group of users, you would connect to the Teams PowerShell and enter new -cs Teams meeting policy. By the same token, to remove commands, these allow you to delete those custom policies that you have created in your organization. Now, any users targeted by a policy that you delete with this method, or via the Teams Admin Center, will revert back to the global policy, because there is a global policy for every type of policy within Microsoft Teams, and by default, out of the box, users are all members of those global policies. When we assign them to a custom policy, the global policy is no longer applied to them, and they go to the newly assigned policy. And to do that, we use the final command, the grant command, to assign the policies to a particular user. So that would be grant -cs Teams meeting policy. If you remove that with the remove command, they're going to revert back to that global policy. So here again on this slide, we've got a few other examples of some of the adds and gets and various commands that you can use with the Teams PowerShell Skype for Business Online connector commands. So definitely worth checking out that documentation at docs.microsoft.com. Okay, so this session is all about what's new with PowerShell and Teams integration. So we need to take a little bit of a look at some of the recent and key changes, what's been happening in Teams PowerShell in recent times. We've already touched on it a little bit, but you can get more information on the Microsoft Teams PowerShell release notes at the link that I've included in the slide here, docs.microsoft.com, en-us, Microsoft Teams, Teams-PowerShell-release-notes. And this will take you to the site which shows you all of the recent updates, in fact all of the history of Teams PowerShell since its inception. But on this slide here I've just included probably the biggest change to the Teams PowerShell was in its history since its inception would be version 2.0.0, which was released in March of this year, 2021. And in this release, the Connect-Microsoft Teams is the entry point now for all commandlets. So that includes the Skype for Business Connector commandlets present within that module. The new CS Online session is no longer available, so that's been replaced with the Connect-Microsoft Teams. And the module now uses the Microsoft Authentication Library, the MSAL, as opposed to the Active Directory Authentication Library, the ADAL, for its authentication and its authorization. So that was a pretty big release, version 2.0.0. And since then, there's been a few sort of incremental updates that Microsoft have tweaked and pushed out and added and taken away some features. The most recent one is the May 2021 version 2.3.2 preview at the time of this presentation, and some of the things that this provides are support for access token login with the Connect-Microsoft Teams commandlet. They've also added access tokens parameter that accepts the array of token. MS Graph and Teams Resource Token are required when using the Access Tokens parameter. And they've also removed Azure AD Access Token and MS Access Token parameters. So for more details, take a look at the Microsoft documentation. And crucially, the Skype for Business Online connector is now retired. So if you look at that docs.microsoft.com link there, the Teams-PowerShell-move from -SFBO. You can get all the details on that, and there's a little preview on the image there about if you need to migrate from Skype for Business Online connector to the Teams PowerShell module. And it's showing that now Teams PowerShell module, as we've already alluded, provides a complete set of commandlets for managing Microsoft Teams directly from the PowerShell command line. Administrators no longer require the Skype for Business Online connector for their Teams administrators. And this was notified through the Message Center post that you see there in the example on March the 16th. Important to be aware that the Teams PowerShell module uses modern authentication, but the underlying Windows Remote Management, WinRM client, must be configured to allow basic authentication. So you can see more information on the Microsoft documentation for that, for instructions on how to enable WinRM for basic authentication. And then we've got a nice little triangular yellow warning there about the Skype for Business Online connector. Connections from that connector will be rejected. In fact, already will now have started to be rejected on that date of May 17th, 2021. So if you have any issues there and you need some assistance, then it's advised to contact Microsoft support for help for migrating to the Teams PowerShell module. Okay. So that concludes our slides just for now. So we will switch gears and we will jump into our demo environment and have a look at some of these PowerShell commandlets for Teams in action and perform a few common day-to-day tasks that Teams administrators are likely to come across. Okay, so now we are into our demo, and I am logged in to a demo tenant into Teams, into the Teams app. It's a Contoso Microsoft demo app. I'm logged in as the administrator, and for the purposes of this, we're going to use the administrator account and the Adelvance account, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. So what we want to do is we want to ensure that we have things ready in PowerShell. first and foremost. So let's launch PowerShell. If we right click on the PowerShell icon and in the taskbar here, we're going to select run as an administrator because that's always best. We're into PowerShell. Let's just make that window a bit bigger, so hopefully you'll be able to see things okay. And the first thing, if you're using PowerShell for the first time for this, the first thing you're going to need to do is to check your execution policy. So let's just take a little look at that. If you start typing in a command, a little tip for you if you don't know it, if you hit the tab key, it's going to toggle through available commands for you so you can quickly get to the one that you want. And we want to look at the execution policy here for PowerShell. So this is set to remote signed, which is great. That's going to allow me to do whatever I need to do when connecting with Microsoft Teams. If you had that set to restricted, then you'd need to change that by using the set-execution policy dash remote signed command to get you there. Okay. Now the other thing I want to look at before we connect to Teams is let's just have a look and see what modules we have installed here already. So we'll go get-installed let's tab that. It's going to complete that for me. Get-installed module. What have we got in this version of PowerShell on this machine? We've got two modules. We've got the Azure AD Preview module in version 2.0.2.136. And we've got the Teams version 2.3.1 version. These have both been derived from the repository, the PS Gallery repository. We've got a description there of what they're doing. If I just jump over to my Edge browser here and just switch over to this tab here, this is the PowerShell gallery page for the Microsoft Teams packages, and I'm on version 2.0.0 here, which is the latest sort of major version of the Teams PowerShell module, which was released back in March this year. So minimum PowerShell version for this is version 5.1, and in fact you may recall from the slides that 5.1 is the recommended version to use for Teams PowerShell due to some bugs with version 7, for example. The easiest way to install any PowerShell module is just by copying the command from here, from the install module option. So you'll see what this is going to do here: install -module -name Microsoft Teams -required version 2.0.0. I could copy that to my clipboard, go into my PowerShell, just right click, it's going to paste that in for me, and that would go ahead and install that for me. I'm not going to do that in this example because I already have a newer version there of the PowerShell module, version 2.3.1. So we will just backspace that out very quickly and just very briefly go back to the to here. If you scroll down the PowerShell gallery for the Microsoft Teams module, you can actually see the version history, and the latest version that you have at the moment available at the time of this presentation is the 2.3.2 preview version, which was last updated 7 days ago. 2.3.1 is what I have. I'm happy with that for the purposes of this demonstration. You can easily click into these versions here and see what came with those versions. And get the package details and so on and so forth. But it's very easy to install it from the command line. You do have some other options. You can do the Azure automation option to deploy to Azure automation, or you can do a manual download as well. We're not going to do anything like that. What we're going to do, we're now going to connect to Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to connect to Teams as the admin user for my demo Contoso tenant. So I'm going to pop in the command here, connect-Microsoft Teams, tab that, it'll complete the command for me. Now it's going to launch my modern authentication login, and I want to select this account actually, so that's the one we want to log in as. We've got some very inventively named friends characters there from earlier demos, but we'll select this, we'll pop in our password, and connect to PowerShell. And that is us connected into the PowerShell for Microsoft Teams. So what's the first thing we may want to do? Let's have a look at the teams that we have in our Microsoft 365 environment. We can do that by typing in the command get-team, simple as that. It fetches the teams. There's a slight difference in how that used to look if you were using the old Skype for Business Connector new CS online session version of this module. It's all baked into the Microsoft Teams PowerShell commands now. So here we can see the teams that we already have in our tenant, and we've got a small amount. And the information that we can view here is we can see the group ID for each team, the display name, the visibility, whether it's public or private, is the team archived, false or true, the mail nickname, and the description. Okay, that's great. What if I want to see the teams that a user at Dell has access to? Let's just switch over to my list of pre-populated commands here. So I'm going to copy this command here. We'll paste that into the PowerShell. So what we're going to do here is get-team -user, a Dell's username. Let's hit enter on that. And it's thinking about it, and this is showing that the teams that Adele is able to view in this tenant. So pretty near enough the same list actually. There's just a couple I think missing from that list. It's a very shorter list. So those are the teams that Adele is a member of. What if you want to search for a specific team? Well, if you wanted to do that, we could do get-team. We've got a team there called design. So let's get-team -display name. And we put that in quotation marks. And let's go for the design team. Again, it fetches those. There we go. We can see just that team. We can filter it down by searching for that team that we want to look for. And we can see that group ID. We can see that the display name, this is a private team. It's not archived. All that good stuff. Okay. Another useful command that you can run is get-team channel. Now, what you can do here is you can just put that command in as it is, and then it's going to ask you for a group ID. So if we wanted to see the channels that are included in one of our teams, all we have to do, let's pick on the retail team for this one. Let's go ahead and copy that group ID, and we'll just go edit and copy. And let's just paste that in to the group ID there. Hit enter. And there we go. We can see that the retail team has the general channel and the NC460 channel. So let's just toggle over to our teams and have a look at that. Let's go into the retail team, and there we go, exactly as it is showing in PowerShell. We've got the general channel, we've got the NC460 channel. So nice and simple. And these are the sort of commands that I'm going to really show you here today. We're not going to get too clever or too deep into the weeds. We're going to do some simple commands for you to get to know how to do things within Teams with PowerShell. The main thing that I want to sort of focus on for this demo of PowerShell commands for Teams is policy examples, and probably most specifically meeting policy examples. So you may or may not be familiar with meeting policies, but very, very quickly, let's just go into the Teams Admin Center. Okay, so now we are in our Admin Center for Teams. And we want to have a look at the policies. Before we look at the policies for meetings, which is what I'm going to specifically demonstrate in the next few examples. Just here, when you go into the Admin Center for Teams, you'll see that there is currently a warning there saying that the Skype for Business Online Connector PowerShell module has been replaced by the Teams PowerShell module. And if you click on the Learn More there, it will open another tab for you, and you'll get guidance there on what you need to do if you still need to migrate to this. This was covered in the slide deck, you may recall. But we want to think about meeting policies right now, and if we go through the dashboard here and just go down to meetings and take a look at our meeting policies, we can see these meeting policies available to us in here already. We've got no custom policies. Everything is out of the box by default. When a user is provisioned for Teams, then they're going to be in the global org-wide default policy for things like meeting policies and messaging policies and all the other flavors of policies which are available. And you're able to see that from the users by inspecting them and through the PowerShell as well. So let's just have a little look at the Teams meeting policies from a PowerShell point of view. Let's just clear this screen just to tidy things up a little bit. And let's just pick on one of our meeting policy examples here. What I want to have a look at is, well, first of all, let's just get the CS Teams meeting policy global. We'll start simple. So right click, paste that in. So what we're going to do here is have a look at the Teams meeting global policy. And let's see what we've got included in it. So it'll just go off and return that information. As you can see, there's a lot of information in there. So, and if you do that for all of the policies, you're going to get pages and pages of stuff. So, but there's a lot of powerful stuff in here. So there's the identity, the description, allow meet now, lots of true, false, enabled, disabled settings, lots of things that you can control. Now, one thing that is in here that we're going to use as an example is the allow breakout rooms setting. So that is set to true by default on all Teams policies. And if you go back into the Teams Admin Center and have a look in the global org-wide default policy, this is not a setting that you can manipulate from here. This does not appear anywhere in the meeting policies. So this is a good example of something that you're going to have to do from the PowerShell if you want to prevent users from having access to the breakout rooms. So that's something that's instantly a quick win for PowerShell. Okay, so we can see there's lots of settings here we can manipulate. So let's drill down a little bit more and do some more examples. If we want to filter a bit further, let's have a look at the Teams meeting policy and have a look at how that's set in terms of, if we paste that in, I don't think that took. Designated presenter role. Let's just copy that to our clipboard. Let's just paste that in. And what this is going to do, this is going to show us that setting, the setting for designated presenter role mode for all of the meeting policies that we have. Very, very useful indeed. So we could do a similar thing with the allow breakout rooms setting. So let's just take out that filter there and go allow breakout rooms, hit enter. We can see all of our meeting policies there and the setting is set to true. Okay, fantastic. So what if we want to make some changes here? Then we could go ahead and use the set command. So let's say we want to modify the designated presenter role for one of these meeting policies. Let's just take a quick look in the meeting policies themselves and see what that actually looks like. So the designated presenter role. Let's go down to that setting. It's quite near Here we go. And that's this setting here under participants and guests, roles that have presenter rights in meetings. At the moment, that's set to everyone, but user can override, which, yeah, that's verified there in our PowerShell. If we go to the drop down, we have some other options that we can set here. We can set it so that organizers have the presenter rights, but users can override. Everyone in the organization, you might want to set this so that only people within the organization have the access rather than everyone. And that's the example that we're going to use here in the PowerShell. So let's go ahead and do that. So if we go back into our example here, this is what we're going to do. We'll take this example here and we'll apply that to the global policy just as an example. So let's just clear our screen a little bit. We'll paste that in. So here we go. Our command is set-cs teams meeting policy dash identity. Global is the name of our Teams meeting policy. The setting we're looking for is designated presenter role mode, and everyone in company user override is the setting that we want to apply. So let's go ahead and set that away. We've got an error there, and I think I know immediately why. It's because we need a dash just before the designated presenter role mode. And there we go. So another thing you can do is hit the up arrow, as you probably just saw me do there, and this will toggle you through the most recent commands that you have. So let's just take a look now. We'll go back to that command that we ran earlier to get the CS Teams meeting policy. For the identity of the policy and the designated presenter role mode, hit enter on that. We should now get a return which is slightly different. We can see now that our global meeting policy has been changed to everyone in company user override. Good job. So you can see how easy it is. It's nice and simple. It's very logical and very, very easy to use. So let's go ahead and show you how you would apply this setting that we referenced earlier to have the breakout rooms disabled for certain users. So how would we do that? Let's go and have a look. What we're going to do here is we're going to set up a new Teams meeting policy, and we're going to call that disable breakout rooms. So here we go. I've got the command already here to pop in, and what this is going to do, we're going to do, we'll copy that and then we'll go back to the PowerShell, paste that in. So what we're doing here, we're going to do a new hyphen CS Teams meeting policy dash identity. We're going to call it disable breakout rooms, and then the parameter that we want to set, we're going to do allow breakout rooms. We're going to set that to $false. Okay, so off it goes, and there's our policy. So, and we should be able to see quite late on, it returns all the results of what it's created in the policy. And here we go, we've got that setting here already. Allow breakout rooms is false. Everything else is default, which is what we want. So that's good. Job is a good one. If we go back to our meeting policies in the Teams Admin Center now, and let's have a little refresh, we should see that new policy appearing in this list. So let's just, and there it is, disable breakout rooms. And we'll see here that this has the distinction of being a custom policy because we have set this one up. It's not one that is out of the box from Microsoft. We go in there and we don't have anything in here that indicates the setting for the breakout room. So that's a good example, as I say, of something that you're going to have to do in the PowerShell to configure that setting. Okay, so what would the next step be? Let's have a logical think about this. Okay, what we want to do is we want to use our user Adele Vance, and we want to assign that to Adele to be her policy. So let's go ahead and do that by using this command here. We shall copy it, we shall paste it in, And the grant command is what you use to assign to the policies to individual users. So what we're going to do here is grant-cs teams meeting policy dash identity, the username, Adele V, tenant name.onmicrosoft.com, dash policy name, and then the policy name in quotation marks, which is disable breakout rooms. So we'll hit that, and that is applied. Nice and simple. If we go back now to our Teams Admin Center, we can see by going to the users, let's just take a look at Adele. And if we go to view policies for Adele, we should be able to see, here we go. That's applied immediately. So that's how quick it is. It doesn't take long. It's the PowerShell is immediate, and we've got the meeting policy set to disable breakout rooms, and it's been applied directly. Everything else remains as the global org-wide defaults. You could make these selection changes here as well from within the Teams Admin Center and assign the policies to users that way. But you'll see it's nice and simple doing it from the PowerShell. So that's some examples of using PowerShell with Teams and meeting policies. But there's all sorts of other things that you can do with policies and settings within the Teams Admin Center and PowerShell. If we just have a quick look at, for example, messaging policies in Teams with PowerShell. There we go. And we should get the docs.com here. Assign policies to your users in Teams. Okay. Oh, that's not what I'm looking for. Let's just head back there. Here we go. All right. So in this case, I mean, we've already had a look at the set CS Teams meeting policy. It's a similar principle as you go through these Teams commands. And if you go to the docs.com reference here, we can see we've got all sorts of different ones. We've got set CS Teams messaging policy, which is going to control the settings that users can and cannot use in Teams when they're in the messaging and the chat functionality, shall we say. So these are really good reference points for the sort of switches and parameters that you can put into your PowerShell commands for Microsoft Teams, and you always get some really good examples as well. So let's just have a look here, and it tells you what it's going to do. So this one here, set-CS Teams messaging policy. In this case, they're going to have a policy applied called student messaging policy, and they're going to allow the Giphies to be set to false and the memes to be set to false, because we don't want students playing around with Giphies all day. So that's a good example of taking some of the fun out of Teams, shall we say, but which is sometimes necessary. Another example of a student policy here. So get the student messaging policy and then set it to allow the Giphy as false. So in example 2, different property values are configured for all the Teams messaging policies in the organization. So in this one, it was targeted at a specific property for that. So here we go. Lots of parameter examples there. So we've got -allow Giphy, -allow immersive reader, you get the idea. And if we scroll down, we can see lots of other examples as well of the sort of things that we can configure. CS tenant blocked number exception pattern, and it's very, very straightforward and easy to follow, and definitely something that the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. But I would say is play about with it, start small and build, nice and simple, and you won't go wrong. So one thing I always forget to do when logging out of Microsoft Teams and in PowerShell, and I really shouldn't forget to do it, is disconnect. So you should really put in this disconnect hyphen Microsoft Teams when you're finished. There we go. And then that's going to log you out. And that really is Teams PowerShell in a nutshell. As you can see, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of different policies and settings. I would advise you to look at the Microsoft documentation and familiarize yourself with the get, set, new, remove, and all of the Boolean sort of values as well that you have. It's quite logical and easy to pick up. But you're going to find it helps you enormously as you administer Teams. And with all of the recent changes that have come in with the newer Teams PowerShell module, it's just going to get easier. Keep an eye on that PowerShell gallery for the latest versions of it and what's coming, and decide which version that you want to apply, and you won't go far wrong. So that is the end of the demonstration. Thank you very much. Okay, and with our demo now concluded, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your time today in attending my session on Teams and what is the latest with PowerShell for Teams. I really appreciate your time. If you want to reach out to me at any point, just feel free. You can reach me on Twitter or LinkedIn and various other forms as mentioned at the start of the presentation. And please do keep on checking back on petri.com for more great content like this and great articles. So thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.
The session has now concluded. There are many more sessions ahead. Stay tuned and don't forget to download the handouts.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming by to join me in my session here on the PowerShell one-day virtual conference. My talk is on PowerShell reporting. I want to give you some tips, some tricks, and show you some techniques that you can use in your PowerShell work. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Jeff Hicks. I am a longtime Microsoft MVP, originally in PowerShell, now part of Cloud and Data Center, but I'm basically still call myself a PowerShell MVP because that's really what I do on a daily basis, PowerShell. I am a veteran IT pro. I've been in IT for over 30 years, a lot of it in infrastructure, and a lot of my PowerShell and automation work kind of is geared towards IT pros based upon my background. I am an author of a number of PowerShell books. I do courses for Pluralsight. I do in-person teaching. I help people out wherever I can. I speak at conferences. Anything that's PowerShell or automation related, that's what I'm interested in, and that's what I try to share with people. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff Hicks. So why are we here? Well, I'm assuming that you need to build or use PowerShell as part of your daily job. You probably manage things such as Active Directory, or maybe some virtualization platform like Azure, Hyper-V, or VMware. Or maybe you're responsible for Microsoft 365, or really any other type of cloud service. And more than likely, I'm expecting that people, which could be you, want information from these things. They may want things such as summary reports, how many users are in Active Directory, how much disk space are we using in Azure, that sort of thing. You may need some detailed reports to troubleshoot a problem. Or maybe you have reports that you have to prepare on a periodic basis. All of these things can start with PowerShell. The first key takeaway here is that always start with a basic PowerShell command. If you can't run a command in the console, you'll never be able to automate or build reporting around it. And kind of related to that is focus on the object nature of PowerShell. Don't try to feel that you need to parse or format or tweak text or anything like that. If you work with PowerShell and adopt the PowerShell paradigm, object in the pipeline, then you'll find that the reporting that you want to do will be that much easier to accomplish. So what type of reporting are we talking about? Well, it could be something as simple as a formatted on-screen report, information that you want displayed in an easy-to-view format. Maybe for you, maybe for someone else. Maybe you want to save it to a file or print it out. These things often are text files. It's really not that difficult to create a nicely formatted text report. Now, even though I just said work with objects and don't worry about text, there is a fine line here between working with objects and ending up with the text that you want. And you'll see that when I get to the demonstration. Another option for reporting is simple structured data. Maybe you need information in a JSON file, or XML, or CSV. As long as you think about objects in the pipeline, it's really not that difficult to create that kind of structured data. Or you may be interested in preparing some HTML reports. This is always a popular topic for people, and I've got some great examples I think you're going to like. So instead of spending a lot of time in PowerPoint, let's jump into PowerShell and let me show you what I'm talking about. All of the demos, by the way, are available on GitHub, and I have the link there, and I'll try to share it also at the end of the session. All right, let's go into PowerShell, and I have a demo file so you don't have to watch me type a lot of things. And this is also something that you can grab from GitHub. I have the link there. And I'm going to go through and try to give you as many examples as I can of how to create reports with PowerShell. As I said just a moment ago, it is very important that you always start with a working command. So let's say that I want to build some reporting around the idea of getting what features are installed on a server. So I'm going to use the get Windows feature, and I'm going to query a server that's in my test domain. And because I want to work with this output, again, I'm just going to save the output also to a variable. This is the default output that you could expect. And it's kind of nice. It shows me, what's installed. I got little boxes that are checked there. And if I wanted to, I could send that to outfile and maybe be done with it, because that's actually some nice output. But don't assume that the output that you see on the screen is everything that there is. And don't treat this output all as text. This is actually an object, right? So if I take my variable, $feet that I created, pipe that to get member, sure enough, you can see that this is a Microsoft.Windows Server Manager commands.feature object. And you can see there are properties there. The default formatting just made this object easier to read on the screen. But I can work with any properties that are listed there. And maybe for my reporting, I only need a subset of those properties. I'm going to get a sample object that I can work with to kind of fine tune what I want to build my report around. So let's get a sample object. Where it's installed, I'm just going to get the first one. I'm going to get all the properties, and I'm just going to show it to you, but also save it to a variable $sample. All right, so that is $sample. So I can see all of the properties. And now I can see also that some of these are nested properties like additional info. Looks like it has some other values that I might want to pull out. I'll show you how we're going to do that in a little bit. But once I see that, then I can say, you know what? I know what I want. I just want the display name, the install state, and description. Now you could use wildcards for the install, but I'm going to list them out individually here. Okay, it's pretty good. So that may be what I want to get out of Get Windows feature in terms of my reporting. I got the information, I got a sample object, I fine-tuned kind of what I am looking for. So I have a good start here. But I may want some additional information that is not in this output. For example, I may want to include the computer name because that is not part of the default output. Now I know that I connected to computer SRV1, so I can add a custom property here with select object for a computer name. And I'm also going to add another property called report. The idea is that I'm saving this to a report, and it might be useful to know when I created this. When did I look at server 1? So I'm just going to get the date formatted as a string. So let's just take $sample here and give this a shot to test out. All right, so that is a sample object of what I'm going to try to get in my report. So I've got the properties from the original command plus some ones that I added. And I do this kind of thing all the time. Now that I have an idea of how that's going to work, let's go ahead and run this for all of the features that I pulled from my original command. All right, now I'm starting to get some reporting information that is of value to me. I have just what I need plus some additional things that I have added. Now with $RPT, because it's now an object, I could export this to a CSV, to JSON, to XML, to any other kind of structured data format that I might want. I could send it to a file. I could send it to a printer. Although there are some things when you go to building a text file that you might want to take into account, and that's what I want to show you next. So you may want to take this reporting data, right, that I just did, but I want to display it as a table. So I can take my object, format it as table, And I'm going to use the group by parameter, and I'm going to group all the output by the computer name. More than anything, just so that the display can be a little more concise, and I can have a header basically that shows the computer name. And I don't really necessarily need to see all of the properties that I have in my custom object. Maybe I just want to see just the reporting date, the display name, and those installed properties. So let's just do a little quick test here. All right, so that looks a little nicer. You can see I've got the header there that shows me the computer name. This I definitely would want to just send to Outfile and maybe call it good. Everything I need to know is right there in front of me. Let's tweak this a bit. I can also say, well, maybe I want this to be a list because I want to include some additional information, and as a table, it's just too much. So let's do this as a list. I can also group by computer name, even with the list. Let's run this. I may want then to save this output to a text file. So I'm going to save the FL to a text file. And now if I open this, say, in Notepad, and this may not necessarily be a problem, but let's go ahead and do this anyway. So Notepad is kind of forgiving. And if I'm just looking at it, I can scroll and it will fill the page. But if I were to try to print this, it's probably not going to print very well because I am exceeding the length of the lines, which are typically 80. So you can see here, this is going to be bigger than probably it's going to fit on a printed page. So here's how you can handle that if you need to do printing. The default width is 80, which should accommodate most printers. I'm going to, just to demonstrate that this works, I'm going to take my formatted list data and send it to Outfile, but I'm going to use the width parameter and just specify a width of 65. So now if I open up this file in Notepad, you can see that it is clearly shorter now. So if I were to print this, I'm now going to have a little more white space in the margins, and I know it's not going to wrap or kind of be ugly looking. Now, if you wanted to, and this is not something that I typically do all the time, but sometimes you want to have a nice text report, maybe something that's going to be emailed or printed out, and you want to add a little something to it. I have a module that I have written called PS Script Tools, which you can solve from the PowerShell gallery. One of the commands in it is a command called add border. It's just designed to add a little text information. And there are other features that you can look at in the help. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a text report. Kind of goes against my idea of working with objects in the pipeline, but sometimes you might want to do this. So let me show you how you might attack this problem. I'm going to create a title for my report called Windows Server Feature Report. And I'm going to be using the data that's in $RPT. That object has my report property, which is my date string. So I can just save that to a variable. So now I have $title. That looks like that. Now I'm going to create a here string. And in the here string, which I'm calling $out, I'm going to put in my title. But I want my title centered. So I found a nice little trick to do this is to take the length of the title times 1.5 and then pad it with blank spaces on that length. And then I'm going to add the server name, bordered, and I need to do this as a string. Add border will write a multi-string object to the pipeline, but I need a single string here. So I'm going to run add border, pipe to out string, and then trim off all the trailing spaces that that command might also create. So what's this look like? So there's $out. So there you can see, there's my centered header, and there is the title block for the computer. Now what I can do is, for my report, I'm just going to get the features that are installed. I'm going to sort them, and then for each one, I'm going to build a here string that's going to include the display name, and then an underline, which is the display name length, times the dash, and then the description. The nice thing about here strings is if I put in spaces or or white spaces or like tabs, that will all be incorporated into the here string. Create a here string for every object and then append that to $out. Run this and save $out to a text file. And here's the text file. So there is my report. And you can see there's the underline of every feature and the description. Not too bad. If you needed to do something like that, that is how you could do this. I could then print it or email it. I might, if I'm saving this to a file, in this line here, I might also have wanted to take advantage of the width parameter. That's really kind of up to you. It depends on what you're going to do with the report. Another option that you can use to enhance your reporting is ANSI escape sequences. Now, I have also in the PS script tools, there was a command called show ANSI sequence. I know it won't work in the PowerShell IC, and I think I have this written so it won't work in VS Code either, although technically it should. So this will show you, for example, what the different sequences are so that you can copy and paste them and use them in your PowerShell work. Get PS read line option would be another example where you can look and you can see these are all ANSI escape sequences. ANSI escape sequences are strings. They start with an escape character, which is character 01XB, or I think it's character 27. In PowerShell 7, you can use backtick E to indicate the escape character, and then the code, then your item, and then you need a closing element for the ANSI escape sequence, which is escape bracket 0M. And you'll see all this here in just a second. Let me copy this and just throw this in terminal. All right, so you can see that I have the string foo in red. So this is the open part of the sequence, and then this is the closing part of the sequence. So with that, what I could do is something like this. I can take all of my features and pipe them select object, and I'm just going to create a new string. So if it is installed, I'm going to use the display name and color it in green. Otherwise, I'll show the display name in red. And then I still have the rest of my output. And I'll send this to format list. Let's run that. All right, so there you can see the feature is turned green if it was installed and red if it's not. Those visual cues can really add a lot to your reports. Let's go even further though with this, because I don't want to have to do this all the time. Now, I already know that the objects in $feet are my native objects that you get from running Get Windows feature. And we've seen that there's a custom formatting view that displays it when we run the command. I can create my own additional view for this object type. This requires an XML file, but I got you covered. Since you've already installed PS script tools, there is another command called new PS format XML. You pipe a sample object. You just need one object that has all the properties defined that you're going to use. Specify the path, the view name that you want, whether you want it to be a table or a list, you can group, and the properties that you want. I ran this. I got some read-only errors, which I'll have to take a look at, but you can ignore them. And I ended up with this file here. So this is the XML file. And what I did is that I edited the entry for display name, which was normally just a property name like this. And I'm using the code here from select object. So if it's installed, then display it in green, otherwise display it in red. So with this now, I need to just load this format file into my PowerShell session. Now, if I type $feet, so that's the default output. But if I do $feet and pipe it to format table and use my view, now I get the custom view, and this is using the formatting that I want. So I do this a lot. I have another module called AD Reporting Tools that creates a lot of information from Active Directory and uses a lot of custom format files, many of which include some ANSI escape characters to make it easier to view the data. All right, so this is a good start, but this is still maybe not as rich as I would like and requires a little more effort on my part. But this is not as rich as I would like, and I always like to go further, so let's go further. Let's create some custom objects and some formatting. Now, the whole point of reporting here is I'm assuming this is something that I want to run repeatedly. So I don't want to have to be running get Windows feature, the computer name, select the properties that I want, add the formatting file, and all of that. That's not really of good use of my time. What would be better would be to build a reporting tool based upon that starting command. And so I have a function that I wrote called get feature inventory. At its core, I'm still running get Windows feature. Still only takes a single computer name because get Windows feature only allows you to take a single computer name, but I can write my function in such a way that I can pipe in computer names. I have support for alternate credentials. But here's the main part. When I run get Windows feature, as I'm doing up here, so I get all the features, I'm now going to create a custom object for every feature that I get back. So this is how I do it. I'm going to create this custom object here using PS custom object. And the first thing that's very important is to insert a type name. You can only do formatting files with a defined type name. So I'm going to create a type name called feature inventory item. I'm now going to add the properties that I want for my custom object. So I'm creating properties of feature, name, install state, description. Here's version, and this is where I'm taking that additional info object and I'm grabbing the major version and minor version and creating a new property called version. So I'm surfacing that nested information up into my object. I'm getting the feature type, the computer name, and my report date. It's important that you don't limit yourself here. You may only think, oh, I only need these 3 properties. Get as much information as you think you need or might need in the future. It's much easier to filter out the stuff that you don't want than to try to add it later. Build a rich object. When you're in get process, that's an incredibly rich object, but we don't see all of the properties that are listed there. We have formatting files. There's properties and property sets that you can use. Build the object that's going to give you as much information as you think you're ever going to need, and then worry about how do I limit what I have to look at. Because you may have different needs. I may need to look at this group of information or that group of information. So don't limit yourself. In fact, because I now have a custom object, I can even, and this is all in the same file here, I can extend that type. Run, for example, in the function, update type data. And I'm just going to splat here. I'm going to add 2 properties, note properties. One will be the source. What computer did I run this command on? And then also who ran this command. The object will include not only the feature, but also some kind of metadata about where it ran and who ran it. And I also built a feature inventory formatting file. Looks like this because I've grouped information on the computer name and then I added a script block to include the computer name and the report date. I have the script block to only use ANSI if I'm in PowerShell console or VS Code. And if it's installed, then it'll be displayed in green. Otherwise, I just display the feature name. So let's come back here then and let me .source this file. So now I just quickly ran that, and if I run $env, well, here's pipe it to get member first to show you. All right, so you can see it's a feature inventory item. There are all the properties, and if I just get the first one, pipe to select all. So there are all the properties, and you can see the source and the reported by. There is my default output. This then, if I wanted to do something else with this, to save it to a file or export it, I could. When you export it, you don't get the ANSI formatting, but you will get all the other data. The ANSI formatting I only get when I use the default formatting. And here's the code that I use to create that file. I also created a custom view called feature type. Because I grabbed a lot of useful information, I can do other things with it, such as showing, okay, here are all the things that are featured. So there's the version. All right, so there's things like roles, role service. These are all properties that I got from that feature object. In the time we have left then, let's get to the really fun stuff, and that seems to be HTML reporting. I'm going to leave you with lots of demos so you can dig into this yourself. Very important, read the help. Obviously, the big thing we're going to be using is convert to HTML. In PowerShell 7, there are some additional changes that they made to that commandlet, so you need to look at the help and examples, whether you're running in Windows PowerShell or in PowerShell 7. So here's how I might take the information that I've created from my inventory. And I'm going to create a file here, and let's just send this to convert to HTML. I'll give it a title. I'm going to use some pre-content to put in the server name. I'll select the properties that I want to format, and this is very important. You need to specify the properties of the object that you want to be converted to HTML. Otherwise, PowerShell will do everything. And then some post content. In the post content, I'm using the inventory item 0, the reported by, and report, because those values are the same for every single object, so I only need one of them. And then I'm going to use a CSS file that's in the same directory, and then save this to a file. Now let's go ahead and run it. There we go. And now if I look at the report, all right, so there's my output, all formatted as HTML, and there is the footer, that post content that shows me who ran the report and when they ran it. All right, so you can do something like that. It's really not that complicated, but you may want to take things a step further. And for example, that CSS file, this file only works if I look at it in this directory. If I would try to email it, not going to work because that CSS file isn't there unless I reference some internet server or some other location. But that's okay. There are ways that we can get around that. One thing that I can do is let's build a wrapper script. All of this line here that I had problems with, let's line 145. I don't want to have to type this all the time. Instead, I much rather have a reporting tool that I can run, especially because if I have a reporting tool, I can set it up as a scheduled job and have it run periodically as often as I need to. So here is a wrapper script that I wrote. All right, so this is using, and this is going to .source my get feature inventory function that we just looked at. This wrapper script is going to take the computer names and the credentials and pass them on to the underlying function. The only thing I've really added here in terms of parameters is the path to the file that I want to create. And I've given it a default file name and path. So let me go through a few things here in this script. First thing I want to point out is I'm defining some metadata. And this came across from a presentation I did a number of years ago for a user group, and I was showing them some reporting things, and they mentioned that they started adding this type of data because what was happening, they had some scheduled HTML reporting that was coming and getting sent out through email. But no one remembered or knew where the reports were coming from. They would just get through the data because it just came through email, but they did not know what server is this job running on, who's running it. What I've started doing for scripts like this is include some information that shows me who ran the script, where it ran, and the name of the script file. So this is all information that I'm capturing here, and I'm doing this in a custom object, and you'll see why here in a little bit. I'm going to be creating a bunch of HTML fragments, and so I'm going to I'm going to put them in a list object that will make it easier to work with. All right, so now the fun part. I'm going to create a header object, $head. And this is a here string that includes a number of things. First off, and this is just something I've decided to start playing with, I'm going to add a comment, and I'm going to take that metadata info and put it in the header. So if I looked in the source code and looked at the header, I could find out where the file came from. I'm also embedding the CSS right in the HTML file itself. I'm not a CSS person by any means, but I know how to copy and paste with the best zone. And I also have a header for the report title, which will go into the document. Here is my command to do get feature inventory. Now, this wrapper function allows me to specify a comma-separated list, and then for each one of them, I'm just splatting parameters to get feature inventory and saving each output that I get to my data list. I then go through each of the objects, and I'm going to group them on the computer name because I may have multiple computer names. For every item in that group, I'm going to add the fragment, and this is an HTML fragment. It's going to take the computer name as an H1 tag. I then take the group object, and you kind of have to visualize what PowerShell is doing here. And I'm going to take the group it on the type, whether it's a role or feature or something like that. That then will have a H2 tag, and then I'm going to do one more nested group for the actual feature itself. And then each of those elements will be treated as a table, selecting the feature name, the name of the feature, and description. And all of those get added as fragments to my fragment list. Then at the very end, I'm going to just take my metadata again, that's $info, convert it to a fragment as a list. Now here's the fun part. I'm going to treat that data, when it's converted to HTML, as an XML document. And I'm doing that because I want to insert a class attribute and give it a value of footer. In my CSS, I've got some code that will format the footer. So the $footer then is a here string that uses an italic tag and then the inner XML of the meta XML document. I add that to the footer, and then I finally convert to HTML, my header, the report title, the body, which is all the fragments, and then save that to a file. What this means then is that I can run a command like this, then give me an HTML report that looks like this. So there's the file. This is all using my CSS. You can see, so there's the feature. This is available. Now, I'm still not happy with this CSS. I'm not quite sure what I have messed up, but regardless, I can see if I were to look at this, if I were to get this in an email, I could see when the report was ran, where it originated, Windows 10, the script path. I put in a little version number for the script file, and then who wrote it. So all of that now becomes much nicer information for me to work with. All right, we're not going to have time to go through everything here. I have some other examples. Here is another function here called server health that I'm just going to show the end result here. You can also, and you'll have to look in the code for the file that generates this, you can also add things like JavaScript. So I have in this file, I have some links that will collapse different regions. So if I wanted to, I can toggle, look at everything. I've also used the same kind of technique in creating the XML And then inserting additional classes. So if I wanted to, I could make an alert or a warning. So I have some color coding. And if you really wanted to go all out, I also have another script that will do a report on your on a Hyper-V machine. And let me just show you what that output looks like. So you can also include or embed a graphic. You'll have to look at the files, see how I did that. And then lastly, some of the Active Directory stuff, because this is pretty cool. And I'm just going to do this all from here. Nope. Assuming I type it correctly. I have a number of functions that have custom objects that use custom formatting. So there's a custom formatting. I've got some that use ANSI formatting, or even something like this. I'm just going to try to come back and copy and paste this. I seem to have a few more minutes than I expected, so I'm going to push back in on myself here. And let me give you a little more background and details on this Active Directory module, and specifically this AD branch command, because I think it really demonstrates how you can pull all of these reporting techniques together, especially if you're building some sort of module for your tools. So here's my function, and this is up on GitHub, so you can look the source code yourself. So the function is querying Active Directory, but the heart of it is creating this custom object here. You can see I'm giving it a type name of AD branch member. And here are all my properties, all coming from the code that queries Active Directory. Now for the fun part. Because I have a custom object, I can also create, as you saw me do earlier, a format file, which I did. I even used my new PS format XML file to help generate it. All of those files go in my formats directory in the module folder. That's what all of this is over here. So here's the format file. This format file is going to create a table. I'm going to group all of the output, and I'm grouping it with a custom script block. Here's my code. Because this won't work in the PowerShell IC, so I'm filtering that out. And actually, this only will work in the PowerShell console. This won't even work in VS Code. This is something that I have to fix in the next release. So if the host name matches console and the class is equal to user, then I'm going to define an ANSI escape sequence. My ANSI escape sequences are actually stored in my module. I have a variable called AD Reporting Tools Options that allows the user of the module to be able to customize what kind of ANSI they want to use. I even have a command called Get AD Reporting Tools Options so I can see what the values are. There's also another command that allows the end user to modify this. So I am in my formatting file. If it's user, I'm getting the user class value, which will be this value here. This is the opening part to my ANSI escape sequence. Then I have the string for the class name of the object. And then this is my closing ANSI escape sequence. And I do the same thing for computer and group. I then define the variable $C. And if none of these things match, if I'm in, say, the ISE or VS Code, then I'm just going to display the class. And then I have just a custom string here that displays the parent property plus my custom ANSI format here. And this is why you saw what you saw. This formatting file has to be loaded. My script file just defines the function. It didn't run update format data like my other functions did in my demonstrations here. Instead, in the module manifest, you have a section here called Formats to Process. And you just have a comma-separated list of all of your PS1 XML files. The naming convention typically is the object type.format.ps1 XML, and as you can see, I have quite a few of them. So here's the one that I just created. I also have some other ANSI escape sequences listed in here. So when I import the module, all of these files get loaded. All my functions get exported. The module gets loaded. Then when I run the command, I get all of the ANSI sequences and I get all of the custom objects for me as well. This module also has some tools to build HTML reports, but I'll leave these things for you to explore on your own. So this is a combination of a custom format plus some ANSI. So all of these, I think, are good reporting techniques. There's lots of things that you can experiment and try. It just depends on what you need to do and how you want to use the data and who's going to look at it. Let me jump back to the slide so I can wrap this all up. Now that's just a taste of the things that you can do with PowerShell, and there's much more that you might want to incorporate into your PowerShell reporting. Maybe things such as working with Markdown and creating Markdown documents, or Jupyter Notebooks, which is becoming a very popular means of documentation and reporting. You may want to create reports that you can display in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Graph, which seems like a very hot topic these days. Many of these areas have some PowerShell tools that are out there, and these are also topics that I'm likely to write about. So follow me on Twitter or keep an eye on my blog. So with that, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today and learning more about PowerShell. Again, you can follow me on Twitter. There is the link for my blog and my GitHub repo, which has not only the demos for this session, but also lots of other material that you might want to look at as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll be chatting with you shortly.
The session has now concluded. There are many more sessions ahead. Stay tuned and don't forget to download the handouts.
Hi and welcome to the Petri Get It PowerShell Day. My name is Russell Smith, and today I'm going to take you through the basic concepts of Windows PowerShell and how to use it to automate common Windows Server admin tasks. Today's presentation is going to be broadly divided into two sections. So I'm going to take you through the basics of PowerShell, so what it is and how it works. So the idea is that you can basically go off and use it to do whatever you want to do, not just limited to the tasks that I'm going to show you in today's presentation. But then in the second half of the presentation, I'm going to move on to showing you some common admin tasks that you can perform using PowerShell on Windows Server. Things like managing roles and features and Windows Update. So let's start by understanding what PowerShell actually is. Now it's a shell and it was designed for automating tasks, and it was designed with the cloud in mind. So you can use it to automate tasks on 10 servers, 100 servers, 1,000 servers, regardless of where they're located. So they could be in your on-premises data center or geographically dispersed around the world in cloud data centers. It's cross-platform, so it works on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. And it's also a very powerful scripting language. Now, PowerShell is the first ever shell to be object-oriented. And basically what that means is the information that commands output are formatted in a structured way. So you get structured data which you can then use in other commands without having to parse that information to find exactly what it is that you're looking for. You can also extend it, so it's not limited to just automating Microsoft solutions. It can be extended through modules, classes, and functions. So you can either write your own, or many third parties have written PowerShell modules, for instance, so that you can use PowerShell to automate their products. And finally, you can also use PowerShell in a DevOps situation where you need to define something as configuration as code. So what that means is, rather than configuring a server by saying, do this, do that, you just define what you want the configuration of that server to look like in a file. And then PowerShell will go off and configure the server to make sure it looks like your definition, and also make sure that the server stays configured in that way throughout its entire life cycle. Now, just to complicate things a little, there are actually two versions of PowerShell. Now, the version of PowerShell that comes with Windows as it ships today, both Windows 10 and Windows Server, is PowerShell 5.1. Now, this version of PowerShell is actually what we're going to use today, and if you only want to automate Windows Server, this is probably the best place to start. Now, this version of PowerShell is actually deprecated, and what that means is that while Microsoft still supports it and is supplying security fixes and all the rest of it, it's not actually developing it any further. Now, PowerShell 6 and higher versions, we're now on PowerShell 7.1 as this webinar goes out, is cross-platform. So it works on Windows, although it's not installed by default at this stage, and it also works on Linux and Mac OS. The advantage of using this version, not only is it cross-platform because it's based on .NET Core, it also has better performance and support for secure shell, which is really useful if you need to remote into Linux servers, of course. The disadvantage of using PowerShell 7 is that there isn't full support for all Windows PowerShell modules. A lot of them do have native support in Windows 7, but quite a few of them don't. So for the purposes of this demonstration today, and if you're just starting out with PowerShell on Windows, I recommend that you start with the Windows PowerShell, just to make sure everything runs smoothly and as you would expect it to. Everything that you learn for Windows PowerShell is absolutely valid for PowerShell 7, so you don't need to worry that everything's different when you move over. Everything will look exactly the same. So let's start with the absolute basics. Now, what you're going to be interacting with are PowerShell commandlets. And commandlets are stored in PowerShell modules. And there are lots of modules that come with Windows that you can use to manage various aspects of the operating system, like services, files, Windows Update, server roles and features, and I can go on and on. In principle, every server role and feature in Windows Server has a corresponding PowerShell module so that you can manage that feature with the command line. Now, PowerShell commandlets are always formed by a verb, a hyphen, and then followed by a noun. So what that means is you get an action word like, I don't know, get, delete, new, something like that, and then a noun, so the thing, so new, I don't know, new folder, new object, get module, get command. So it's always formed like that, and the noun is always singular. So for instance, you wouldn't type get services, you'd type get service. So let's have a look to see how that works. Now, probably the first commandlet that you should learn is get help. So I'm going to type here get help in my PowerShell window here, and I just scroll up a little bit so that you can see all the output there. And it's just basically telling me about the commandlet here, because I actually need to give it a little bit more, get help on what, of course. But you can see there that we have the verb, so the action word, and then the noun, which is help. So let's say I want to get help, I don't know, on a command. So I'm going to scroll back down here. So I'm going to type here get help, and I want to know something about, let's say, the get module command. And you can see here that I get some relatively minimal help about how this commandlet works and the syntax. So you can see here that there are various ways that I can use this command. It tells me what the alias for the command is, so I can type GMO instead of get module. I'm getting some very basic help here in terms of what is the syntax for this command, but I'm only getting partial help here, and I need to update the help on this system using update help if I want the full help file. I'm not going to do that now because it takes quite a long time to do, but you get the idea. So for instance, let's have a look at get module. So I'm going to type get module, and I want to see all of the available modules. Get module command can be followed by various different parameters. I can also use here something called tab completion, because let's say I have no idea what parameters I can use with the get module command. So I just put a hyphen there, which indicates that I'm going to put a parameter here. And then I can use something called tab completion to scroll through the different available parameters. So here you can see if I press tab once, I get the first one that's available to me, name, so which module do I want to see information about, and I can scroll through all of the available parameters here by just pressing the tab button on my keyboard. And this really helps me to use these commandlets when I have absolutely no idea how they work. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to start from the beginning, and actually what I want here is list available, and this will list all of the available modules on this device. And you can see that there are quite a lot. If I scroll up, you can see all the different modules that are available, and they've been categorized by the path, so where those modules actually live on the local computer. As well as tab completions, we also have command history. So if I want to run a command that I previously ran, all I need to do is press the arrow up button on the keyboard, and there you can see it goes straight back to get module list available. If I go up one more, it goes back to get help, and I can go backwards and forwards through my command history using the up and down arrow keys on my keyboard. So let's have a look at how another command works. Let's have a look at the get command commandlets. So I'm going to type here get command, and I want to find if there's a particular commandlet that allows me to work with BitLocker on this device. So I'm going to say the get command, use the name parameter, and I'm going to just type here BitLocker surrounded by an asterisk. And what that means is that whatever is in the command name, it should look a bit like this. Yeah, it doesn't have to be exactly BitLocker, but a bit like this. So I'm going to press that, and you can see there that I've got a fair number of BitLocker commandlets that I can use here. Things like disable BitLocker, add BitLocker key protection, and there's a whole load of BitLocker commands that I can use if I need to. Now, one thing that you should be aware of when you start using PowerShell is command aliases. So for instance, you might see some odd things in scripts that you find on the internet where they have, like, I don't know, GMO written. And what does that do? It actually does the get module command. But how do you know what is going on with these aliases? How do you find out what the alias actually stands for? Well, there's a get alias command. So you can use it just basically to list all of the aliases that you have on your system. So these are all the default aliases. You can actually create your own. If I want to find out what a particular alias stands for instance, I've got a script here and it's got a question mark in it, but I've no idea what that alias represents. So I can type here get alias and then the name of the alias, and I just want to find out about the question mark. And it will show me there, in the results I see that question mark is an alias for the where object commandlet. One other thing that I want to say about help is that there's really good help online, and to be honest, I use that most of the time instead of the get help commandlet that's built into PowerShell here, just because it's always up to date and I don't have to do that huge download to update the help on the local system. Now, I said that PowerShell was object-oriented, and I want to show you exactly what that means right now. So let's type here, for instance, I want to get information about the services running on this device. So I'm going to type get service, and you can see here there's a whole load of information about the services that are running. So I'm just going to scroll back to the top, and you can see this is a table basically, and we have 3 properties displayed for each service. So the service status, the name of the service, and the display name, or the friendly name if you like. But I want to see all of the available properties for each of these services because this is not the entire list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the get service command that I just typed. So I'm going to type it again. And I'm going to pipe, so send, if you like, the object created by the get service command, and I'm going to send it to the format list command to be precise, because it's just easier for me to view the information in a list rather than a table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the format command to take the object that get service creates and format all of the data in a list, and I want it to show me all of the available properties for each service. So I'm just going to put an asterisk. Here I could put a specific property, but I'm just going to say I want all of the properties. So I'm going to press return. And now you can see a lot more information coming into the console window here. So you can see, for instance, the Xbox Net API service here, and you can see all of the properties that are available as part of that object. And we were able to do that by basically taking the object from getService and piping it into the format list commandlet. And this is the absolute basics of how object orientation in PowerShell works. And you can see here in the command output how the output is formatted and how it's structured in a way that we can carry on using as part of our script or part of our command line. Now we'll be coming back to object orientation later, but that's just the basic understanding of how it works. But it's really important to get that with PowerShell, because until you've understood that concept of being able to pipe objects from one command to another, it's really hard to do anything useful with PowerShell. But once you've got your head around that, then you will understand how powerful it really is. So let's just take that a little bit further, and let's say that I want not to see all of the properties for each service, but I want to see just 3 specific properties. So all I need to do is come back up to my previous command, and I can list here the 3 properties that I want to see. So let's say I want name, I want status, and I want the start type. And now you can see that for each service I get just those 3 properties. I could also, of course, format this as a table. So I just replace this commandlet here with format table. And you can see now I have that as a table. So you can format the information in whatever way is more convenient for the information that you're trying to get. But what if I want to run these commands against a Windows Server device? So there are 2 different ways that you can do that. The first is using invoke command. So I'm going to type here invoke command. And I only have one remote server at the moment in my lab, and it's called DC1. It's actually a domain controller. So I need to put computer name DC1, and then, for instance, I can run a piece of code. It could be a single commandlet, it could be a script block. Let's just type up script block here, and I'm going to say get execution policy. I might talk a bit about execution policy later. And you can see now that I've got information for DC1. The run space ID is not really important at this stage, but what we've actually got back is the information that we wanted, and we can see there that the execution policy is remote signed on DC1. Now the great thing about invoke command is you can see that I just put in one computer name because I just have one computer in this lab, but you can put in as many computer names as you like there. You know, it could be 2 or 3, 10, 100, or you could read a list of computer names out of a text file, for instance, and you could run your script block against hundreds of remote devices all at the same time. Now the other way to do this, so you don't have to keep typing invoke command if you want to just work on a single remote device, is to actually establish a remote session to my Windows server. Now I'm going to open up a new tab in Windows Terminal. I can increase the size of the text there. I'm just going to go back to the root of C so that you've got more space there to see what's going on. And I'm going to use enter PS session to do this. And computer name DC1. And because I'm already logged in as a domain administrator on this device, of course in a production environment I probably wouldn't be doing that. I get straight into there without having to put in any additional username or password. But you can specify credentials if you need to add those credentials to connect to a remote endpoint on Windows Server. Now don't forget that PowerShell remoting is enabled by default in Windows Server, so there's no particular configuration that you need to do. As long as you're in a domain and connecting from a domain device, everything should just work, as long as you're providing some credentials that have administrator access to the endpoint. So now you can see in the command line window that we have a slightly different command prompt there. It's prefixed by DC1, so that indicates that we're now working on a remote device. So let's have a look at some more Windows admin stuff that we can do with PowerShell. So we started with the get service commandlet, and I want to show you a little bit more advanced stuff that we can do with that. So I'm going to just quickly here shorten the command prompt so that we've got a bit more space. And let's go back to get service. So type here get service. This time I want to see which services have been stopped. So I'm going to pipe this information from get service into the where object commandlet, and this allows me to use a pipeline variable. So from the object that's generated by get service, I can basically use the status property of each service, and I want it to show me just services that are stopped. So I'm going to say there, please show me services that are just stopped. So if I press enter now, you can see that I get my list of services, or table rather to say, and you can see here that it is only showing services on the device or on this server that are in a stopped state. Now, of course, this is useful get service for getting information. If I want to start and stop services, it's very easy as well. I can, for instance, let's just check the status of the AJ router service. So get service, AJ router, so it's stopped. So let's start it. So I'm going to say start service, AJ router. Okay, and I can check the status again, and now we can see that that service is running. So I'm going to stop it. So I'm going to say stop service, AJ router. And now if I run get service again, we can see that that service has now stopped. I can also get other information, as we saw before, very specific information. So maybe I want to find out what the startup type for this service. Is it automatic? Is it manual? So again, I'm just going to pull back this information for AJ router using get service. Then I'm going to send this information to format list. And I want to get information just about the startup type. So it's actually start type, the name of the property. And here you can see it's set to manual. So now let's say I want to change the startup type from manual to automatic. And I can do that using the set service command. So if I type set service and then the name of the service, so what was it, AJ router. You can see here that I'm using lowercase and uppercase, but it's actually not case sensitive at all, just to make it easier for you to read. And I'm going to set startup type to automatic. And there you can see that's now set to automatic. So what about managing files? Now, the first thing that you probably want to do is to be able to list a directory. And the command to do that is get child item. It's not very obvious, I would say, but that's what it is. And you can see here, this is the C drive of my server. Now, there are various aliases built into PowerShell that you can use instead of get child item. So you can type GCI, for instance, or you can type ls. I think that comes probably from Unix, or dir, which probably you're familiar with on Windows. So all of those things are aliases for the get child item commandlet. So if you want to list, for instance, I'm just going to use the alias because it's just easier to type it out here. Let's see, I want to see everything in the program files directory. But I don't want just the first level, I want to see everything that's there. Everything all the way down, everything that's in that program files folder. So I need to type recurse here so that it will work its way through the folder tree. So if I press that now, you can see it's probably going to take a little bit of time there just to output everything. So that's basically how you get the information about directories on your server. If you want to create a new item, let's say I want to create a new directory, there's some work we're going to do here that requires a directory called temp on the C drive. So to create a new directory, I'm going to use the new item commandlet, and then I just need to tell it what kind of item I'm going to create. So I'm going to create a directory, and I'm going to call the directory ctemp. Okay. So if I list then, you now see that we have a temp directory on the C drive. Now let's say that I want to do something with that directory. I want to output a list of Active Directory users to a file which will go into that directory. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to use the getAdUser commandlet, and you have to use it with a filter. Regardless, I want everything, but you have to use it with the filter parameter. So I'm just going to use an asterisk again to say I want everything. So this will list all of the users in my Active Directory. But I want to put all of that into a file. So that's really easy to do. So I'm going to bring back my getAdUser, and I'm going to say I want that in a CSV file, so comma delimited file. So I'm going to say please export that object to a CSV file, and it's going to go into that temp directory, and I'm going to call it adusers.csv because that's the kind of file it is. Okay, let's assume that that's done that. And now I want to have a look at what's in that directory. Now, because I'm working on a remote server, I can't just open up File Explorer because it's not on this local computer, it's on a remote server. But no worries, all I need to do is just type get contents, and then all I need to work out is the path. So it's just ctemp, and the name of the file was adusers.csv. And you can see now that information from that file is displayed in the terminal window. So other things we can do things like copy files and folders around, move files and folders around using copy item or move item. So let's have a look at move item. So I'm going to move, for instance, that file that we just created. So that's adusers.csv. And I'm going to move it to a folder that I already have on the system, adusers, and I'm just going to say OK. So let's have a look now at the adusers directory, and you can see there we have a file called adusers.csv that we've just moved. To delete an item, you use remove item. Now, I'm not going to delete anything at the moment, but you just put the path there and that will basically delete it. So also I can rename files. So for instance, let's do it like this. I want to get all files in a particular directory. So I'm going to say, let's say the adusers directory, and I want all files. There's only one file there, but anyway, I want to get all files that have an extension of CSV. And I'm going to pass that on to the rename item commandlet. And I'm going to say, let's give everything there a new name. So we're just going to change the extension. So I'm going to again use a pipeline variable. So I'm going to say, take the name and replace it. So anything that is CSV, you're going to replace basically with .txt. You're going to make them a text file. Let's do that. Okay. So if I come back to get child item and just list now everything in that directory, you can see that adusers is now a txt file, a text file, and no longer has the CSV extension. Now you can do some really advanced stuff with this. So the command line that you can see on the screen will basically return all files that are older than 6 months. So you can see here that I'm using getChildItem to get everything in the program files directory all the way down through the folder tree. And I'm going to pipe that to where object. Now here you can see that I'm using ps_is_container. Now ps_is_container means folder, but I want files. So you can see the exclamation mark before the pipeline variable, and basically this means is not. So anything that is not a folder, so i.e. they are files, and we're going to ask for the last write time for each file, and anything that's less than the current date minus 180 days, so 6 months ago. So anything that's older than 6 months, that will be probably pretty much everything in that folder, I would imagine. So if I come back to the window here and run that command, you can see now that we get a list of all of the files in the program files folder that are older than 6 months. Now on this device, on this server, I also have a folder called Files. Let's have a look to see what's in there. Let's just recurse that so we get a bit of a better idea. And I'm going to expand on the code that I just ran, and I want to now actually delete anything that is older than 180 days. And not only do I want to delete those files, but I want to write a log file to have a list of which files have actually been deleted. So if you have a look at the code that I have on the screen here, so this is Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to highlight it here. And this basically takes what we did before with the getChildItem commandlets and using the PS's container property and the last write time, and then we're using a for each loop to basically go through each file and to delete it if it matches the criteria that we specified, and to write the name of the file to a log file using the outFile commandlet. So let's run that. And I'm going to come back to the terminal window, and I'm going to use getContents, and I want to actually view what's in that deleted log.txt file to see what it actually deleted. And you can see there it was able to find a whole load of files that are older than 6 months, and these are the files that it deleted. So what about managing Windows Server roles and features? So there are a series of commandlets that we can use to do that. So the first that you should know is get Windows feature, and this will show us the features that are installed on this device. And I can see if I scroll up here, we have WoW64 support. Anything basically with an X, we can see that we have PowerShell installed here and various other things installed. Of course, we've got Active Directory because this is a domain controller. If I want to install a feature, all I need to do is use the install Windows feature commandlet and type the name of feature. So I know here there's a feature called Telnet Clients, so I can install that, and now you can see it will go away and install Telnet on this server. And now you can see that this feature has installed and that there's no need to restart the device. In a similar fashion, I can just remove the Telnet Clients and replace that with uninstall. And now we can see that's been removed from this server. And that's pretty much it for installing features and server roles. And of course, you can use all the goodness of object orientation with these commandlets as well. So let's move on to maybe what is the elephant in the room, and that is Windows Updates. Now there is a built-in set of commandlets for managing Windows updates, but they only work in Windows Server 2019 and later. Now I'm going to start by showing you a little bit about how those commandlets work, and then I'm going to show you another module, which is a third-party module that you can find on the PowerShell gallery that you can install, which is what most system administrators use to manage Windows Update. And it's much more flexible and comprehensive than Microsoft's own module for managing Windows Update. So let's start by having a look at some of the built-in commandlets. So I'm just going to type here get command, and I know that the module name that's built into Windows Server is called Windows Update Provider. So we can have a look to see what commands are available. So we've got a few available there. So for instance, I can run get Windows Update version. That's going to return some cryptic version number. You know, maybe that means something to you or not. And what else can we do with this? We can do things like start a scan. So I can say start WU scan. And then I can say I want to search for particular things. So for instance, I just want software. And what I want to know, is it installed or not? Or not installed, yeah, so I'll do it like that. And I can even put that actually into a variable. Let's call it updates. And we can then use that object stored in that variable in the next stage. So let's just run that and see what happens. This is just a search at this stage. It's not actually going to install or download anything. It's just going to show us what's on this system. Might take a little while to do that. Okay, so if I just now put updates into the terminal window, you get a list of all the updates that it's found available for this device according to the criteria that we've just specified. So what I could do now is I could use the install Windows updates command, and I can say what updates? Well, actually the updates that we just discovered. So we have that object stored in that variable, and I could say, for instance, maybe I don't want to install them right now. I could just say download only. I'm not going to do that because I don't want my server doing all sorts of things in the background while I'm trying to do this demo. Basically, it would download all of those updates according to that search criteria that we just ran. We can also run, there's another command that's quite useful, which is get is pending reboot, so we can understand have updates installed and is the server waiting to be rebooted, and we can see no, that's not the case at this time. So that's basically the Windows Update provider that Microsoft provides, but as I said, there's a very popular module in the PowerShell gallery that you can install, and I'll quickly show you how that works too. So because it's a third-party module, you need to install it, but it's easy to do, so you just go install module. Of course, you need internet connectivity on the device to be able to do this. And the name of the module is PowerShell Windows Update. And that will probably just take a few seconds to download and install. So it's going to say, do I want to do this with the NuGet provider? Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, untrusted repository. Okay, well, I do trust this particular module, so I'm going to say yes. So again, this might not be something you want to run on a domain controller, but for this demo, that's what I'm going to do. There we go, we're done. So now I have a whole load of new commandlets that I can use. The first thing that I want to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to add all software to Windows updates. So not just Windows updates, maybe we'll have some Microsoft software installed on the device. I wanted to update that as well. So I can use the add Windows Update Service Manager commandlet to do that. Am I sure I want to do it? Yes, okay, and that's done. Let's have a look to see what commands we actually have here. So I'm gonna, which module? We know it's called PS Windows Update. And you can see here we've got many more commands that we can now use to manage Windows Update, which we didn't have with the default module that Microsoft provides. So just quickly, I'll show you a couple of things that you can do with this. So there's the get Windows Update command. Oh, should learn how to type. Get Windows Updates. And for instance, I could install particular updates. So I can say KB article ID, and then I can list, I don't know, KB blah 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 blah, KB blah 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 blah, and KB blah 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 blah, and I can say install, and that would install just those particular updates related to those knowledge base articles. The other thing I can do is install Windows Update. And I could say, for instance, everything, but not drivers, and let's say, I don't know, not feature packs. And just so that it goes through without me having to do anything. I can say just accept all there, and you know that would basically install everything that's available for this device, but no drivers and no feature packs, which is of course really useful. Another thing that I could do, for instance, is let's say, this is probably not going to be really relevant for a server, but I could say update everything but not Teams. Okay, so there could be some particular component or a piece of software that I don't want to update. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about execution policy. So if you want to run PowerShell scripts. Now, PowerShell scripts are basically just text files with an extension of PS1. On Windows computers, you have several different execution policies. Now, these don't necessarily stop users from running scripts, but it's just a safety mechanism that you should think of, maybe something like a seatbelt. Users can always find ways to get around them. They're really just designed to stop scripts from accidentally running or from accidental malicious running of scripts. If you actually want to block scripts from running, you should use something like application whitelisting to do that. Again, this is just a safety mechanism, not to actually block scripts. But here you can see that there are a couple of different execution policies in Windows. You've got all signed. So everything should be signed by a trusted publisher, regardless of whether the script was downloaded from the internet or whether it's a script that was created locally. Remote signed is the default execution policy in Windows Server. So this applies to anything that's been downloaded from the internet. It must be signed by a publisher that that server trusts. And restricted. This is the default in Windows 10. So basically all scripts are blocked by default. But as I said, you can find, users will find ways around this. It's not a control as such. If you're looking at running scripts on non-Windows devices, then scripts do not need to be signed. Non-Windows devices will run any script. Okay, that's it from me today. I hope that you found this useful and you understand how PowerShell works and how you might be able to use it to automate some of the things that you need to perform in Windows Server every day. Please enjoy the rest of the sessions and please feel free to follow me on Twitter. You can also reach out to me there if you have any more questions.
The session has now concluded. There are many more sessions ahead. Stay tuned and don't forget to download the handouts. And that is a wrap, folks. I want to give a big shout out to our speakers today for helping make today possible, taking time out of their busy schedules to dive deep into PowerShell to make you a more productive user and help you manage your environment, your operating systems, and everything in between just a little bit more effectively. Hopefully you learned something new. I definitely did. There's many takeaways, and one thing you should definitely take away is scroll down the page and you can find the handouts from all the sessions. You're going to want to print those out and take them with you because that is going to help you retain the knowledge. So that being said, folks, we have these just about every single month. You can find more on the archive page, but that wraps it up for now. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch all of you right back here next time.